I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Frankfurt Plant Board on Monday, May 16th, 2022 at 5 o'clock in the community room. This meeting is being held as a replacement to our regular scheduled meeting, which would normally be tomorrow, but because of Election Day, we're doing it as a special meeting today, so this is our regular monthly meeting. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of April 19th, 2022 board meeting. Everybody should have them in front of them. Does anybody have any changes or corrections?
I have one question on, I guess it would be on page 18 of our packet, under item 12. Action item 12. I think there's just a typo. There's like an extra name at the bottom of the board members' names.
Yes. April Rhodes?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, April's an excellent employee, but she is not on the board and she was not voting that night.
So we can make that correction.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any other corrections or changes? So do I have a motion to approve the minutes with the exception that we're taking April off the board?
So moved.
So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Minutes are adopted. Next item? Call the roll. I'm sorry. Good catch, buddy. Kathy, you want to call the roll?
Yes, sir. Member DeLong?
Present.
Member Cubine?
Here.
Member Mason?
Here.
Member Snyder?
Here.
Member Mitchell?
Here.
All members are present. We have a quorum. Next item is item 2, accept financials for the month ending April 30th, 2022. Mr. Denton?
Thank you, Mr. Cubine. Members of the board, good evening. What we have before you in your board packet, starting on page 21, are the financial statements for the Frankfurt Plant Board for the 10 months ending April 30th, 2022. I'll be really brief because tis the season for all kinds of good financial discussions with the budget coming up, so I'll just give you a quick update as to where we are. So on page 21, looking at the statement of net position as of April 30th, 2022. So this is essentially a balance sheet. This is a snapshot of where we were as a company April 30th. I'll just hit the highlights here. Looking at line 60, you can see total assets of the company just over $203 million, up 3.3%, with one of the main drivers of that increase year over year is the investment in property, plant, and equipment that the plant board has embarked upon with 3 major projects with our reservoir, our smart meter infrastructure, AMI, and also our next band future network for telecom. So we've had a significant investment in capital assets over our depreciation expense. I think through the first 10 months of this year, we've spent approximately $15.6 million of our $30 million budget. So that's a good reason for the driver there. You'll notice liabilities on line 130 of just under $97 million is essentially unchanged year over year. When you take your assets and subtract your liabilities, you can see we have an increase in our total net position. Net position just over $116 million year over year, I should say as of April 30th. And then when you add the two together, liabilities and net position equal your assets at just over $203 million. So not a whole lot changed from last month. I'll do a quick discussion on page 23, just looking where we're at on our external bonds, leases, and loans payable. You can notice we had a sizable decrease, $20.9 million decrease from a year, this current fiscal year, giving our total principal balance of external debt of just under $6.7 million. It's worth noting, I think a year ago, I should say when we hit, in 2019 is when we hit our largest annual debt service total. We were paying about $6.3 million a year in principal and interest, or 6.3% of total revenue. And now we are down to $1.3 million annual debt service, so or 1.3% of total revenue. So a 5% reduction in the last 3 years is very, very impressive, and allowing us to put that money right back into capital projects needed.
When does our last loan roll off? That's on the head end, isn't it?
Yes, we had one just in March, and then the last one will be the FSM third lien lease. That is back in 2029.
Okay.
We'll have that one paid off.
Okay.
Yep. Real quick, I'll hit on looking at our Page 26, just where the financial performance of the company is the first 10 months. So on page 26, I'm just going to focus on the third column, comparing it to the next to the last. Looking at our actual, you can notice that on line 20 there, total operating revenue, when you look at all three lines of business, we are essentially flat from a year ago. You've got electric up 436, and the other two are essentially down about the same, so we're up 55,000 year over year. With that much activity, to only be that much off, that's so we're essentially flat as a company. And we'll also, when you look at total expenses on line 50 and line 280, we're up $835,000, or just under 1.2%. So in an inflationary environment we're in, to be able to contain costs at just over 1.17%, I think is pretty solid for the year. And you can see our net contribution through the first 10 months is just under 11.4 million. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you have on the current financials.
What are you thinking right now in terms of final closeout, June 30th? Where do you think we'll be in terms of actual expenditures against actual revenue?
I think we could do better than expected. I think a lot comes down to our Kentucky Pension Authority adjustment. We've budgeted $3 million of additional unfunded liability adjustment that would hit the expense side, and we book the other side of it to liability. So if that $3 million number holds, I think we could be doing better than expected.
Okay.
If it were to be higher, then it's a paper entry,
Right.
but so I think we could be doing better than expected.
What does CERS do for fiscal year 23, the rate?
I think we have it at 28%.
Does it go up this year, or is it still frozen?
I think we have it going.
Oh, you don't have to, I just,
Sure. I've got to where I'm, at this time of year, garbage in, garbage out kind of stuff. Stuff's starting to get pushed out. We're at 28.5 and holding for the 5 years.
okay. Any other questions on the financials of David? Me? If not, do we have a motion to accept the financials for the month ending April 30th, 2022?
So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, second, do we have any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Financials are accepted. Item 3.1, conduct a public hearing. Mr. Snyder, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This hearing will come to order. My name is John Snyder, and I've been requested by the board to conduct this hearing. With me today are board members and staff of the Frankfurt Electric Water Plant Board. We are here to receive comments regarding tariff revisions related to primary metered services, electric vehicle charging stations, renewable energy certificate programs, and large distributed solar facilities. This public hearing was advertised in accordance with the regulations for public notifications and appeared in the weekend May 7th and 8th, 2022 edition of the State Journal newspaper. To conduct this hearing in an organized fashion, we've asked anyone wishing to comment to register via email with either Kathy Poe or Kathy Lindsay. To date, we have not had anybody sign up to comment. This hearing will be conducted informally and voluntarily by the Frankfurt Electric Water Plant Board in order to accept comments on the above items. Both oral and written comments will be accepted. Any and all persons present here today who wish to make a statement will be afforded an opportunity to do so. If you have a written statement to accompany your oral presentation, a copy of the written statement should be provided to the board prior to your presentation. Oral presentation should be limited to no more than 3 minutes, and if necessary, I will interrupt and request the presentation be completed due to the time limit. I may ask questions or any person presenting oral comments when there is necessary to clarify the nature or substance of the comments. The board reserves the right to answer questions at a later date, and it is the job of the board to fairly consider various points of view and information. We want the public input and involvement, and I hope you do not find our standard procedures restrictive. Additional oral comments after this meeting, if anyone is watching on Cable 10 or on any of our various channels, will be accepted and considered if they're submitted no later than the end of normal business hours on Monday, June 21st, 2022. I want to double check. That probably should be Monday the 15th. Isn't our regular meeting going to be the 16th on 2022? Wouldn't the 22nd be the 4th? Sorry about that.
I don't have a calendar in front of me.
Just hit me.
No, I think the 21st is the 3rd.
Oh, it is the, okay.
Okay.
The 31st is the
Okay, so it's actually should be Monday, June 20th, not Monday, June 21st. I'm sorry about that. So it'll be on Monday, June 20th.
Yeah, that's what it is, yeah.
Yeah. 2022. If you submit a comment, you can contact FPB at our main number, 352-4372, or on our website at www.fpb.cc. Before we open the floor for any comments, Travis McCullough will provide a summary of the details involved in the tariffs. Travis?
Good evening, everyone. I'll dive right in if that's all right with the board. Most of these items we've discussed several times over the preceding meetings. These, of course, are the tariff revisions that have been provided that are a follow-up to the rate study that was presented in March to the board and discussed a little bit at the April meeting. The first tariff revision that's up for discussion is the primary meter service. The board has been provided a red line copy of the proposed changes to the primary meter service. So again, this is one for if a customer owns their own high voltage facility, so they're metered at the high voltage point and they own the facilities beyond that. Craig Brown with 1898 and Company did a rate study. They recommended a 2% rate reduction for customers that choose to take that primary service and want to own, operate, and maintain their own facilities. So if you have a primary meter, but you still want us to take care of everything, there may be an option to be grandfathered into sort of the old way of doing business. This isn't necessarily to say we're going to impose changes immediately on any customer, but if you would like to take advantage of that 2% rate reduction, and I should clarify, the reduction is on the billing determinants, not the rate. So your kWh usage, or in some cases your kW usage if you're a large power customer. So the way we've proposed the tariff here, if you're an existing customer and you have a primary meter and you want to take advantage of this discount, you would have to purchase your facilities from the board. So that would be primary facilities that have been installed to serve your facility. If you're going to take ownership of them, you would have to pay the board fair market value. We've described fair market value as the reproduction cost minus depreciation. I think that's probably pretty unlikely for most customers to just write a check for a primary system. This is, you know, for most of the customers this would impact, this is quite a bit of capital expense they would have to take on. So we offer the option for those customers. They can repay that over a 5-year period if they would like to take that ownership. Another caveat, one of the items that we've discussed quite a bit, if the customer takes primary metered service, will we maintain those facilities beyond the meter? Under the proposed policy, the answer would be yes, but the customer would have to pay an excess facilities charge, and those will just have to be on a case-by-case basis. We would have to do a study, understand what the operation and maintenance costs are, and then work in an agreement with the customer that wanted that. So again, a couple different options here. If you're a primary meter customer now, you can keep doing what you're doing. Again, we're not imposing any changes. If you are a new customer and you want to be primary metered, we'll come up with a facilities charge if you want to maintain it. If you don't want us to maintain it, you want to own, operate, and maintain yourself, that's fine. We'll stop at the metering point. That'll be the demarcation.
Travis, if you're an existing customer and you don't want to change anything, your
Right.
rate stays, everything stays the same?
Right, yeah, we would, I would presume we would just kind of keep business as usual for those customers. If it's not worth the additional costs or the additional maintenance headaches to take on that system, we would offer them the option to keep kind of business as usual. You wouldn't be able to take advantage of that 2% discount,
Right.
but again, we're not forcing them. Any questions on that one? Kind of a few different options there, but again, we've proposed it where it leaves the customer as many options as possible. We're trying not to shoehorn anybody into one particular policy, kind of lets them take advantage of what works best for them. It also gives us kind of that cleaner demarcation point. Everybody understands who's what. And again, it may be many of these are going to just have to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. Of course, we want the tariff to cover as many circumstances as we can, but
Do any of the board members have questions? Okay, go ahead, Travis. Next one up.
okay, sure. Next one for discussion is the value of solar policy. Again, this is for solar customers, generally industrial and commercial, larger solar customers. So if your system is over 30 kW, We propose a limit of up to 1 megawatt. So you have to be in that range of 30 kW to 1 megawatt. I'm not aware of any customers we currently have that would be excluded by this policy, that 1 megawatt cap. So what we propose is we're calling it a value of solar policy. Essentially, it's an avoided cost rate. So we would compensate customers for their excess energy they're putting back on the grid at the savings to the plant board for the avoided wholesale power costs. Again, another item I should clarify on. We're offering it at a first come, first served basis, up to a cumulative capacity of 5% of the single peak hour load. We wanted to put some kind of cap in there so we have at least an option to reevaluate. I don't know that 5% is the end all number that has to be there forever. I'm not 100% certain that's the right number, but I think it gives us an opportunity, if we reach that limit, to reevaluate, to understand if there are electrical impacts to the system, financial impacts, those types of things. So again, I proposed a 5% limit to take advantage of the policy.
And Travis, you're at that time, if that limit gets hit under this, you would figure out if we do have system issues or anything, and then come back to the board perhaps with a recommendation to keep that 5 there, or move it up somewhere if you don't see any real problems with 5%. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's
Okay.
the intent here.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. The other piece of the value of solar policy that I think we'll need to have some more discussion on is the environmental credit. Again, the value of solar rate is determined based on generation credit, demand credit, transmission credit. Those are our wholesale power costs that essentially we would pass on to the customer. We've had some discussion about an environmental credit. Again, there's not necessarily a wholesale savings piece that we could tie this to. Some utilities that have done a value of solar policy have done something similar to those. So it's proposed as 0 right now, but again, that potentially could be up for discussion. One of the items we talked about was using a renewable energy credit, or REC, as a benchmark for that. One of the questions that came up at the last meeting is, how do we treat the ownership of the REC if we do that? Based on the research I was able to do, the ones that I could find that clearly stated they have an environmental benefit credit, the presumption is they then own the REC. The utility takes ownership of the REC if that's the case. So I think that's one caveat we need to be careful with if you have a customer that doesn't necessarily want to transfer the REC to us, making sure we don't have a concern there. So again, as of right now, the value of solar credit is at 3.365 cents per kilowatt hour. That's based on wholesale power cost savings. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I assume that would only be on overages that roll back across the meter. So really, they are selling the power back to the plant board in a way. So
Correct. Yeah.
the green attribute coming with it makes logical sense, because they wouldn't try to be claiming that above and beyond. Well, they might be. It depends on how they do it.
Yeah, to your point, that's the way I understood the policies that I was able to find. Some states have mandates, which of course makes it a little easier. Everybody knows kind of going in what that's got to be done. But yeah, I would assume that if we're purchasing the energy and giving them a credit for that REC, then essentially yes, I think it's fair to say we should own that REC.
Any other questions?
Oh, good. Okay. Next, electric vehicle charging stations. I'll start with the level 2 chargers. These are the ones we have 3 in the system now that are existing. There's one on Olive Street, Juniper Hill, and the Farmers Market. Again, those stations are currently free. If it comes to pass that we're no longer able to offer them for free, we'll need to have a rate on hand to apply to the drivers that make use of that equipment. We've structured it as an on-peak or an off-peak, or a base and an on-peak rate, with the peak hours described there below. The reason we've structured it that way is essentially if someone is charging on our demand hour, the costs go up exponentially. So it's provided as a base rate and an on-peak rate for the level 2 charger, base rate being 27 cents and on-peak 48 cents. Same with DC fast charging. There's a base rate and an on-peak rate. The base rate is 14 cents, on-peak 40 cents. Again, that DC fast charger is the one that's on its way to us. We do not have any currently installed. Any questions on electric vehicle charging stations or the rates?
Travis, if we get to the point where where the city no longer picks up, and I know for the new one, I don't think there's much stomach for them to pick up the charge, and then we're gonna probably charge on that one. The idea, we are taxed, there's gonna be a tax coming on these if we charge for this. Does that have to be mentioned in the tariff, or is that just assumed that any tax imposed by the state is gonna automatically be collected? Do we have to address that in the tariff? I'm just not sure.
Hans, would you?
I can't think of what the general tariff is right now, but I would think taxes would be, it's required by law.
I'm assuming they would be, I just wanna make sure we're not,
It's required by law to
Right.
collect it,
Mhm.
and generally, the tariff, we could put it in the tariff if the board prefers, but generally, I'm trying to think through terms of the tariff. We don't have, if it's required by law to do anyway, we don't
Right.
have that
We don't
in our
have-
terms and
okay,
conditions
that's
of
fine.
service.
I just,
I know our other rates listed do not specifically talk about tax.
well, a lot of the stuff we have that, there's not, of course, that's changed a little bit now with electrical, but, the residential stuff, we don't, there's no tax charged on it, so it's, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't an issue, but I don't necessarily think it is, I just wanna make sure it's not gonna be
One
an
thing,
issue.
too, what's not, if we put it in there as a particular, if it later changes, then we
Right.
have to go back, so it's.
I mean, you could always just put language that say any tax, if applicable under state law.
Yeah.
Federal or state
And
law.
I don't even know it's something we need to do or need to go there, but, for right now, I think we can, I'm okay with it the way it is right now.
Sure.
But cause those taxes aren't gonna come in until, I think, 23 at the earliest, so we can research that and figure out whether we need to adjust that or not. I'm not necessarily saying we do, I just wanna make sure it's not an issue.
Now, does law trump a contract any day?
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
So, so I don't know why we
Well,
need it.
A little applicable language could cover it all.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
and I-
Just a
like I
little
said, I
applicable
don't-
language?
Sure, yes,
I don't
it's
even know
always
if we
good.
need it,
Yes.
I'm just raising the question.
But it would be nice for essentially a customer to know
Mm-hmm,
that there might also be taxes on top of there and not be
Yeah.
shocked.
right, so.
I have one question about, on the high voltage or the high speed, if people overstay their stay, they can get charged a penalty. I assume that's not in our tariff, that would be sort of the city applying that penalty, or how would that work?
Yeah, that is a good question. There's lots of ways that you can do that. My thoughts are essentially we would rely on the software associated with the charger to handle that. If you stay too long, you're gonna get cut off. If you, that's a good question. If you park there too long, we could, there's nothing in here now, we could down the road, perhaps if that is a problem, explore an hourly base rate per hour that you're sitting here, no matter how much energy you use. Again, this is just a cost recovery rate, so it doesn't necessarily include those things. Perhaps that's something we could, if need be, address in the future, or we could
Okay.
add one now if necessary.
It could also be a law enforcement thing, right, where those funds would go almost like a traffic ticket.
We have asked the city about enforcement. They seem to agree that because of the cost and the benefit to drivers, especially with the DC fast charging, that some kind of parking enforcement will be reasonable.
Any other questions? Okay, Travis.
All right, last one up, renewable energy certificates, or RECs. So renewable energy certificate is the environmental benefit associated with 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy produced. So if you're a customer, you want your energy that you purchase for your home to be offset by renewable energy, you can buy RECs. The program we have proposed is it's a fixed cost per month to the customer, which then in turn the number of RECs would potentially vary based on the amount of funds that we receive. So if a rec is $5, let's say for instance, you would buy one rec at $5. If the price of a rec goes up, you would essentially in turn be buying a little less than one rec. So we proposed it as it's fixed cost to the customer instead of them taking the risk of the market variability of the recs. We would provide a fixed cost, but how much we can purchase, how much purchasing power we have with that money may vary a little bit. The market has been somewhat volatile recently. The prices of recs have gone up quite a bit. Any particular questions on that one? Oh, I'd also like to point out, we're offering this as a service to our customers that want to take advantage of it, that it would be simple. We can just apply it to the bill. Of course, if this option doesn't work for you, customers you can buy recs yourself. You don't necessarily have to go through us just because you're our customer. If you want to go buy your own recs, of course, you have every right to do so.
Any questions? We don't have anybody here signed up to speak this evening, but anybody who is watching and has any comments about any of these issues, this is on the website. This proposed tariff is on the website, I'm assuming, Travis?
Everything here is on the website. I think there was a banner right on the front page. You could get a link to it, as well as the rate study.
Right. And just again, if anyone who is watching has any comment, we encourage you to contact us either by phone or sending us something. You can do it online on our website by the day before our meeting in June, which would be Monday, June 20th. Without any other comments, I'll conclude this public hearing and turn it back over to the chairman. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, number 4. Ms. Jennings, do we have anybody signed up for any comments?
No, sir, we do not.
The next one, item 5, departmental reports.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, the first department we'll have today will be the Telecom Department. The Telecom report is on pages 103 to 106, and we have tonight the Assistant Superintendent Shane Holt to give you the report for Telecom, and he'll also cover an update on Nextband for you as well.
Thank you. Hello. Trouble call is down for the month compared to this time last year. We did have a couple of outages over the past month. One of them was in Node 64, which is Owington Road, Bell Lane area, and that was a bad power inserter. The other one was Node 66, which is US 421 Whispering Pines area, and we lost a secondary feed to the power supply, causing a temporary outage. As far as Nextband, we have splicing crews, aerial crews, and underground crews still in the area. Splicing crews are in Node 36, which is the Crestwood area. Aerial crews are placing fiber in Node 10, which is Landings Drive in Centennial. And then underground crews are currently working in Silver Lake. They're about to surpass the 50% complete mark in that neighborhood before moving on to the next. Other than that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you guys have.
Shane, if I'm a customer out there, and if I want to know if my neighborhood or my area is hooked up yet,
Yes.
how do I find that out? If I want to know if everything's done in my area and I want to sign up, how do I know if my neighborhood's done?
Probably the best thing, we've been pointing people towards the nextband.com website. If you didn't have anybody you could ask directly, if you didn't call the main office, you could always look that up. That allows you to place your name and address in there.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure Kathy Lynn might be able to, I think if it's serviceable, it lets them know right then. And if not, then
If it is, it lets you know right then that, yay, yeah, your area is accessible. Or if it's like, oh, bummer, not yet, but you put your name and contact info in and we'll let you know when it is.
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Any questions of Shane?
I have one question. What is in-home wiring? Is that mostly the customer's problem or the?
No, sir. It's typically the customer problem. It's we're getting homes anywhere from 100 years on up, and just the wiring internally degrades after a given amount of time.
So do we fix that problem? I mean, obviously at a cost, but do we
Yes, yeah, we do. We offer that service. Yes, we can do that, or if they want to contact an electrician or do it themselves, they're more than welcome to do that as well.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you all.
Okay, next we will go down the list to customer service. And, that report is on page 107 to page 110. And tonight, the customer service supervisor, Cassie Estel, will provide that report.
Good evening, members of the board. As Vince stated, our reports are on pages 107 to 110. The highlights I think that we've been hitting on for you all to be aware of is that our payment arrangements or our holds continue to go down. Those are at 390 for this month, so that's down significantly. We continue to grow the ACP program. There's approximately 500 customers participating in that right now. To touch briefly on your next band question, once that customer enters that order into Kathy's website that they've designed for us, her and her team, the next day the customer service department gets those every single day, and we disseminate those to have orders placed for them immediately. So they're contacted the next business day after requesting that to start that process with them. And Kentucky Housing continues to send us funds. They have opened up another grant for homeowners. I think we talked about that last month. But we are continuing to still receive funds from them. We're at a little over $850,000 received from them. So agencies still, Bluegrass Community Action, still helping people with normal stuff also. So anyone who's struggling, just feel free to reach out to those agencies still. Any questions anybody have?
Would this be enhanced? Tell me if it's all right to ask this. We had talked very briefly about if we still have a very low number of people who are eligible for the federal program on helping pay their internet compared to who might be eligible. And we talked about if people, maybe a different approach at outreach or whatever, would be to tell people, because there's a lot of people for whatever reason who either A, don't think they're eligible for whatever reason, can't believe they're eligible, don't want to take it or whatever, but that if people, correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, and can we talk about this, Hans? Yes, sir. If people wanted to, before I step the next step into this, if people customers wanted to sign up for the program, which would give them a $30 a month discount, and they didn't, like I said, for whatever reason they didn't feel like they were eligible or take or whatever, they could turn around and sign up to have $30 a month taken out or donation towards winter care, and that would make their bill net zero difference, right?
Yes.
And I think, Gary, you came up with the figure that if what percentage, we could basically, without a very high percentage, we could raise what, about 1.8 million a year for winter care?
It depends on how many customers we talk about, really. If we say $30, if we say 5,000 customers, then times 12 months.
Okay. And how many customers are eligible?
We really don't know exactly, but we believe every household, they have children in the middle school or elementary school in Frankfurt or in our county, they probably eligible.
And right now, how many people do we have that are signed up for that program?
We have 500, and that's stayed pretty consistent. We haven't had a lot of growth in the last few months.
So basically, I mean, if customers are interested, we could raise an incredible amount of money for winter care with federal funds, and it wouldn't cost our customers anything out of their pocket than what they're already paying. And they could in fact donate to the program. Is that fair? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. So, yeah.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Chairman, Cassie, you said our holds are down, our payments are down. Overall, David, where's our kind of long-term debt? Where is that? Is that back to normal levels completely yet, or?
Yes, sir. Prior to pandemic, we were around $780,000 a month. We would roll month to month in past due accounts, and we're just a little over $1 million right now.
So we're almost down to where we were pre-pandemic.
Yes, sir. We're about $200,000 off of that. So, and as these holds roll off, that continues to drop.
That's all.
And then a question's come up a couple times. Cassie, if I'm $500 in arrears, then, you know, there's electric, there's water, there's the telecom charge, Frankfurt sewer, taxes. I'm down 500 total bill.
Mm-hmm.
And I come in and I wanna apply $100 to it. Where does that $100 go? Prorate against all the charges, or where does that first 100 go?
Our tariff requires currently that that's prorated against all services
Equally.
The
Okay.
only exception to that is if a customer already has a commitment from an agency to pay the electric or to pay the water. Say Bluegrass Community Action has said, we're gonna put 100 towards your electric, and that takes care of all your electric, then your payment is then dispersed to your remaining services.
Okay,
So that's the only exception to that currently, yes, sir.
okay. Any other questions for, okay, thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
Didn't hate to hit you with a bunch of quiz questions.
Mr. Chairman, Board, our next department will be electric. That report is on page 111 to 114. And the electric superintendent, Scott Hudson, will give you the electric report. And then after that, I'll have the AMI report from Travis McCullough, the chief electrical engineer.
Good evening. As you see on page 111, you'll see our SAIDI numbers for the month of April is 30.507. As you look on page 112, you'll see our pie chart. It shows certain percentages for each kind of outage we had. Page 113 specifically spells out how many outages for those percentages with a total number of 25 outages. On page 114, you will see that we had the top 10 outages listed, and the total customer effect was 267 customers for the month of April. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And a quick update on AMI. Basically, same story as last month. We're at 7,525 electric installs, 3,833 water. Material deliveries are still slow. Everything tied to the chip shortage. I'm sure most people have seen on the news that, you know, vehicle shuts down and everything else. So due to the chip shortage, material deliveries are very slow. We're just, I think that's going to be the story for a while now. We'll just have to make the best use of the equipment we get and hope for a quick turnaround on that. Any AMI questions?
I'm a little out of date on seeing what's going on with shortages, but what is your guys' projection? I mean, I know it's a crystal ball, but 12 months? I mean, when do you think start to kind of get back to normal, possibly?
Yeah, we're hoping for end of this calendar year, early next calendar year, things get better. We are getting some water deliveries, so that's kind of been our lifeline for the past month or so. We think that's going to continue to be the case. So obviously you can see with those numbers, we're pretty behind on water. So I think over the next few months, they'll catch up. Those numbers will look, you know, more the same. But it's probably going to persist at least for the rest of this calendar year. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Travis.
Okay, next is the SEPA report. That's on page 115 to 117. You will notice that we cleared $119,256 for the month of March, and for the calendar year now we are up almost 441,000. And so you can see that you can month over month comparison on the next page, 116, and then the life history of SEPA is on the next page. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Next, KYMEA.
QMEA had a regular board meeting and also have a all requirement committee meeting, preliminary discussing the next year rate. We don't know exactly number yet. The target is 3% increase compared last year. Another announcement I just want to make sure board have that information is they have annual meeting going to be this Friday in Louisville. So if you have any of you have a time interest to go, they definitely want to make sure extend that.
And where's that meeting at?
We'll be in the I think airport hotel, right? Let me see. Hilton.
It is at the Hilton Garden Inn,
Yes.
Louisville Airport, 2735 Crittenden Drive.
Yeah, it's right near the fairgrounds.
Fairgrounds.
Yeah.
What
It's
time does that start?
9 o'clock. in the
9
morning.
o'clock.
Yes. Actually, I just forward the email to you.
Okay.
Not long.
Okay. Next.
Okay, next will be the Safety Department. That's on page 119 to 120, and the Safety Director, John Lyons, will give you that report.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As Vint mentioned, our safety report starts on page 119 and runs through page 120. For the OSHA recordables for the month of April, you'll notice our Sports Service Division sustained one OSHA recordable. One of our stock clerks was actually unloading a set of our underground telecoms pedestals, load shifted in attempt to catch it, injure their finger, and resulted in a restricted duty and medical care. If you turn to the page 120 on our vehicle accident reports, sir, you'll notice our telecoms, specifically our security division, one vehicle accident, animal causation, resulted in minor cosmetic damage, no employee injuries. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Mr. Chairman of the board, will be the Water Distribution Department. That report is on page 121 through 123. And Distribution Superintendent Brian Bourne will give you that report, and he'll also give you an update on the reservoir project.
Good news on the reservoir. Good afternoon, Board, Mr. Chairman. The Water Distribution Monthly Report is on pages 121 through 123. We installed 8 new services. We had 0 main breaks and 0 outages, so we had a really good month there. Construction crews are completing road repairs this week on Highland Parkway, so we'll be close to wrapping that project up in the next week. System maintenance crews are 40% complete with our annual flushing program. Now to the reservoir. We had our progress meeting on May the 10th, and since that meeting, the 24-inch overflow, 12-inch drain line, and the 36-inch feed have all been installed to the front of the reservoir. The next steps will be cleaning and disinfecting the tank to be able to put the tank in service. Once the new tank is in service, we'll have a grace period to ensure our water system continues to operate as expected while utilizing the new tank. The next steps for the contractor will be demoing the old tank and construction of the new retaining wall. So that's we're making progress.
So if you're putting it along a timeline, just generally, I mean, I know a lot.
About putting water in the tank?
Water in the tank, and then demo and the retaining wall, what's that look like in terms of?
Well, I think next month we're gonna bring a change order to the board. It's gonna have the updated timeline.
Okay.
So, but as far as putting water in the tank, I'm hoping in the next couple weeks we'll be putting water in the tank. So, once we get water in the tank, and we give ourselves some time to make sure everything's good, then will allow us to drain the other side and let them start demoing the other side. So I think things are gonna move pretty quick, so.
And the neighborhood's being kept informed of what's going on?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
Any questions?
All righty, good deal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, next in the water side, the water treatment plant, Superintendent Brandon Powers will give you that report. That's on page 125.
Good evening, everyone. The water treatment portion of your packet is on page 125. For the month of April, the water treatment plant treated 207 million gallons a day, or for the month, I'm sorry, for an average daily production of 6.9 million gallons per day. Lock 4 averaged 6,448 cubic feet per second for an average of 4.165 billion gallons a day going over Lock 4, and 3.5 inches of rainfall were recorded. If you got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Could we go back to one thing just real quick? Gary, maybe ask you or Vint, just for a general comment. Again, stop me if I'm wrong here, Hans. People are seeing on the news what's going on in Texas and the possibility of, people being, I know we haven't had that kind of heat here yet, but that people being told not to keep their thermostats at a certain level, not to run major appliances, so forth. Would you want to comment just real quick on what's the difference between our system here and what happens in Texas?
Actually, the difference is we are still in the transmission-wise, we're still in the KULG system.
Mm-hmm.
We are not in any of the like ERCOT, MISO, or PGM. But they are all connected together. One thing I do want you to know in our region, as I know, it's not like we short capacity.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one difference. The second part is KYMEA has a long-term agreement for all the capacity we needed for all the members, which is, I believe, is a fairly conservative compared to our peaking load. So we have enough capacity to handle all our load. On the separate one, if we just you want to know the difference, on the you talk about emergency operation.
Right.
If something happened in that scenario, actually KYMEA had an emergency operation plan. They just approved it. They've been reviewed for the last 2 years, but the process in place is if we are under a lot of restrict plan. For example, the notice come from KU, LGE, say we have a limited power supply, then you start to reduce your capacity. They only notice us under the condition the system not going to stable anymore, which is we didn't see that for anything happen last 4 or 5 years, not even very close. Under those conditions, they will notify each member, that include us. Say based on KU for the system reliability, they will say how much you need to start reduce the load. And our operation already have a certain priority based on the customer really need it. For example, we have to keep a critical load in place, like a hospital, like our own safety, the downtown, you know, that's as a highest priority. Then the low priority might go first based on this condition.
But the network we're on, as part of that system, doesn't have some of the vulnerabilities that the Texas system has, correct?
No.
Because I know people are hearing that on the news thinking, you know, if it gets that hot here, is that gonna happen?
One thing I comment a little bit on Texas. I was in Texas for almost 20 years. I think one of the issue is Texas continue to grow their load, and but there's no conventional generation has been built since 2015. So, and all the new generation, all 100% come from renewable. That's a very good to the environment. But sometimes depends on the wind and the solar combination together. Then they have a certain time have a shortage, just like happened last round
in the winter.
Winter time.
Yeah.
But their real shortage could be come from summer, like we say.
I just wanted to add that there because I know people are hearing about that and wondering did that happen here? Does that affect us?
I didn't say in Kentucky, I mean, one can put on more comment, but I really didn't see near future in our region, we have a lot of shortage compared to our regional load and the capacity compared these two. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think we saw any, so I don't expect we will see.
I appreciate, I hate to ask you that off the cuff there, but I think, people do turn on the news and hear it, and so. Okay. The last one is the knock.
Good evening. Looks like your NOC report's located on page 127 of your board packet. In April, the NOC handled a total of 1,899 phone calls, and the locate department is busy as usual this time of year. For April, they did 726 locates. Actually, they had coming in this morning over 100 from the weekend on the books. So it's weather, nice dry weather here, semi-dry, so things are busy. So year to date for the fiscal year, that's 6,168 locates across 3 utilities, is a little over 18,500 locate utilities. So.
And the 100 calls you had coming in the weekend, and you have to turn those how fast?
About 48 hours. And I can take the next hour and go over each one of those with you guys. If you want me to. I don't mind at all.
A lot of them were landscaping. I saw a bunch for one particular pipeline company. So there's gas projects, obviously internet and fiber projects, lots of large projects. That's what a lot of them are. So, and that'll continue, you know, lots of construction. So.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, sir. Vin, any other highlights on the operational side?
No, sir, that completes the report.
Okay. Number 6, action items. Item 6.1, consider accepting water cost of service allocation study as of June 30th, 2021, and proposed customer rate design. Gary and Gannett Fleming.
Yes, I will really make it short. David Daniel have been help us spend a lot of time with our own staff and also the consultant help us. We don't take this very lightly at all. It's so important because we are a business, not a for-profit. So it is how do we make sure we are based on cost, cover our costs. It's very important. Well, I probably turn over to David to do more introduction of our guests and highlight the point.
Sure. I'll do a little background. The last time the plant board did a cost of service study was in 2016. We used Gannett Fleming, who we've had here with us tonight. We have Connie Heppenstall and Greg Herbert here. They'll present the study in a few moments. In 2016, the result of the study came back that we did have revenue falling short of our revenue requirements. So part of that study is looking how costs are allocated and working to recoup revenue from those customer classes that are driving the cost. We came back to the board with a 5-year plan of rate implementation that would start in August of 2016 and run through 2021. So a 5-year rate track. We end up only implementing 3 of those 5 years of rate changes to our customers because there was a delay in the reservoir construction. So that was a significant project that was not need to be funded, so we did delay the last 2 years of rate increases. So back in November of 21, the board approved agreement with Gannett Fleming to do a now updated cost of service study. So that's what we're here to present to you tonight. So like I mentioned, we have Connie Heppenstall and Greg Herbert from Gannett Fleming, and I'll go ahead and turn over them to do a little presentation of the current report, and then we can go with questions from there.
Great. Thank you, David. I'm going to share my screen. That's all right. And pull up the PowerPoint. I thought it was here. We are. I'm Connie Heppenstall. I'm with Gannett Fleming. And with me tonight is also Greg Herbert, who is the analyst on the project, so I'm glad he could be with us. He did a lot of the nuts and bolts. If any of you have been on the board for the last 10 years, I've been working with the plant board since 2010 on cost of service. Represented you in your last rate case, which is I think how we got introduced. Of course, this rate increase we're talking about today would not trigger any kind of rate proceedings in front of the Kentucky Public Service Commission. I'll go through some quick slides here. You also have our full report, and I don't intend on going over that tonight, but if you have any questions, I could absolutely handle them. So the cost of service study is a study that takes your revenue requirements, and that's a term that I just heard David use, but you may not be familiar with, or maybe you are. It's how much does it cost to run your water system? That's your revenue requirements. It's a term of art in our business. So we used, to do the cost of service study, I'll back up a little bit, we take all those revenue requirements and we allocate it by customer class to see who's actually causing the costs. It's cost causation. And we try to make sure that the revenue from those classes match the cost of service. So that's in general what we do. The cost of service was based on revenue requirements and building determinants for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. Your wholesale customer classes, the revenue from these classes is reflected in other water revenue and is a credit to all your other customer classes, their revenue requirement. And you'll see that as I get to the schedules. This, in front of me is the, this is the summary of our cost of service study. And you can see we have the customer classes along the side here: residential, commercial, and public, industrial, private fire protection, and public fire service. The other water revenues that I mentioned include the non-water producers, and the water producer wholesale customers, water producers being Georgetown, and non-water producers being the other. And then you have some other small other water revenues. This cost of service, this is the revenue requirements we just talked about. It's $12,269,600. But what's interesting is to look at the percent too. You look at the percent of the, how much of the residential class, how much is the residential class responsible for that, for your cost of service? 55.6%. Then what we look at that, and then we look at revenues under present rates, and we can see that they're bringing in 52.2% of the revenue. So slightly under where we'd like the residential class to be. And we do that same analysis all the way down to see who's paying their fair share, who may be paying too much. Column 6 are the revenues under step 4 rates. We have moved slightly, you can see, toward cost of service for the residential class under the proposed increase, up to 52.9%, from 52.2%. The same with the commercial and public classes, they're paying a little bit too much, bringing them to 37.3%. And these proposed rates, I'll go over, with the rate structure that produces this money that matches, your needs. And again, this is step 4 rates. We assume that the plant board will implement these rates over 4 years. So you can see the proposed increase, an 8.8% increase for the residential class, that's over 4 years, 5.2% for commercial and public, and 10.6% for the industrial class, for a total of 7.2%. What are the factors driving these additional revenue requirements? I mean, I've been sitting through your meeting here, and I think you all obviously have a great handle on, what's going on in your businesses that you have. So I probably don't need to tell you all this, but you see an increase in operation and maintenance expense, an increase in depreciation expense. You've seen some decrease in usage, and so between when you balance those two things, you're gonna need an increase in rates. So the rate design, we're proposing step 4 water rates, which would be sufficient to pay your cost of service. We're developing a phase-in rate so that we assume you put an increase in this year and then 3 additional years going forward. We looked at cost of service principles when we did these rates so that they're defensible. We're basically maintaining your rate structure. Your city residential volumetric rates are remaining lower than the county residential rates. Are still that same disparity, which is fine. And basically the increase is going to the customer charge so that you have a more stable revenue stream. And I forgot to mention that we did no increase to the public or private fire just because they seem to be paying their fair share. Okay, so now again, this is going to show you all 4 steps of the increase, and it's mostly the customer charge. I think that gives the plant board great stability. It's still not a very high customer charge. This customer charge meaning your fixed charge. Every month everyone pays their fixed charge. Had no increase to the residential or commercial. These are the volumetric charges, no increase to these, except for the industrial class. I want to increase the industrial class volumetric rate a little bit because a greater part of their bill is the volumetric rate, where your residential class, it's a greater part of the bill is the fixed charge. So in order to balance out the cost of service, we wanted to do a small increase over 4 years to the industrial volumetric rate. County rate design, same thing, currently the same, the same structure for the customer charge. Again, not raising their volumetric rates for residential and commercial, but a 10% increase over 4 years for the industrial volumetric rate. Basically, the outcome of this, and I think David mentioned it, is 64 cents per month increase for each year for 2022, 23, 23 to 24, et cetera. What I think is very always important to the plant board is where your rates align with Kentucky American. And you can see under present rates, your both your county and city are below the Kentucky American rate. And even in 4 years under step 4, they will still be below the Kentucky American current rate. That probably will not be that rate in 4 years, as you know. They'll probably be going for a rate increase at some point in the near future. I don't know. But so even in 4 years, you'll be well below their rate. So again, we recommend the increases we align. And I was talking to David about this. And again, what happened, last time I was here and we recommended these increases and then they weren't implemented because, the reservoir, your projects were delayed. I really think that you really need to look at these rates every year, just especially in the inflationary environment we're talking about. You should revisit, because what I'm projecting out even 2 years or 1 year may not be the case. So I think, this is my recommendation now, but I really think you need to keep looking at these rates and be aware that this may be a place where maybe we'll need even more than the increase that I'm projecting at this point. Hopefully not. Sorry, that was a lot, but I know you have a busy meeting. Can I answer any questions?
First, I think it'd be helpful for the board and for people watching. What is your all's qualifications, experience in doing these types of studies and doing this type of work?
Thank you. Yes, what Greg and I do all day, every day, are rate studies, mostly for water and sewer. We do natural gas. We do it for a lot of municipal businesses. We also have I testified in front of the Kentucky PSC and probably 10 or 12 other states for regulatory purposes for cost of service. So basically, this is what we do every day, in and out. And I've been doing it since 2006. And Greg, how long have you been with Gannett doing it?
Since May 2017, so 5 years.
5 years. So I apologize for not starting with that, with our qualifications. But that's who our Gannett Fleming itself, though, is an engineering firm. We're a small piece of that called Gannett Fleming Evaluation Rate. Where we're 15 and this is all we do. So.
Let me just ask one other thing, then turn it over to the rest of the board for questions. As I understand, kind of bottom line, is in 2016, the board adopted a long-term plan to adjust rates, and they did it for about 3 years, and then suspended it or deferred it to match more with the construction of the reservoir in terms of that final construction plan. So now that's coming in, and we need to take a look at those rates. And this proposed rate increase, of course, in a time of inflation, nobody likes to see this. But basically, we're talking about 2 cents a day is what it would cost the average customer, this increase, in terms of making these adjustments. So we're looking at about a 2 cents a day increase per customer for the customers. And I think it's also important to point out that when we're doing this, we sell wholesale to Georgetown, Water Districts, Peaks Mill, so forth, and Forks, and that in no way is that selling that wholesale causing any kind of rate increase. In fact, if anything, it actually probably saves our customers, what, Gary, about $500,000 a year? Because we're treating that water and selling it, that's extra revenue we're getting that, in fact, it reduces, our operating is there, but it actually brings in additional revenue to offset our operating costs.
Because 90% of the cost in the water is a fixed cost.
Mm-hmm.
So I think David helped me study it. Assume today we don't have any wholesale water, what our retail rate would be. I think his number so is a 20% increase.
We did not have those wholesale customers
today. Yes.
So in fact, the wholesale actually is getting our customers in this county cheaper rates. And the other thing I think to point out, and we're going to deal with it here in the agenda in a few minutes, is we'll have to revisit this, as she mentioned, because alone what we've been spending, about $500,000 a year on chemicals. And this next year, we think we're gonna go, what, up 350,000 on chemicals just because of price increases? And we don't know where that ends. So, turn it over to the rest of the board at this point for any questions to either consultants or David or the water staff.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
It's maybe to you all. Explain to me why the county's raised, I think you've done it before, but why the county rate for residential is more than the city.
From a fundamental, we've had that, this has been the way the rates have been structured at FPB for a very long time, and we have worked to move those closer together, but, you know, it's a difficult thing to do for the city customers. If you were to move those together, it's a very large increase.
But there's no more expense for offering it to the county than it is to the city.
Connie, would you have anything to, as far as from a technical standpoint, on the allocation of costs between the city and county?
Yeah, I think David's right. We've been trying to bring them, those rates together over the years, and we've been successful. The commercial and industrial rates are the same. But in this case, because we're raising the customer charge, not the volumetric rates, we didn't really have the opportunity to bring those even closer, the residential volumetric rate. The decision, you know, we thought it would make more sense, even on cost of service basis, to raise the customer charge. But you're right, David. It's been a historic thing, and we're making progress. It's just not progress at this point in this rate study.
And I think the board, we presented to you all 3 different options of rate structure, and one of the rate designs was to move the 2 rates, volumetric rates, close together.
No,
So that's something that we still could do. It just, the board would have to be aware of the impact to the city customer, which is.
So you'd have to do it one of 2 ways. You either have to raise the city and lower the county correspondent, or just totally raise the city up to match it.
Correct. Yes.
David, am I not mistaken that it has to do with density, customer density of, call it linear pipe per customer, or I mean service per customer? It seems like it's less dense in the county, so you have to have a slightly higher rate.
I'm not sure why the historical rate was set like it was, but my understanding from a cost of service perspective, it's hard, the difference is hard to defend, but it's something, it's where we are, and so the correction of that is just difficult to get to. But how we got there, I don't know the historical perspective on it.
I mean, I think what Jason has offered is a rationale for it. I mean, but all I was asking is about the mechanical why, not if there's any other types of reasons why. So, I mean, that makes sense to me. The second question, I hate to be, because I've been on the board, I guess, long, I do need to ask the question about the reservoir and the extra cost that we put into the reservoir from the original. How does that play into, I'm not asking how much, but how does it play into the impact on this cost of study?
Anything that this board, this company does that has an impact on an increase of a rate, no matter what it is, contributes to the rising cost of service, contributes to the need eventually to raise rates. So any decision that was made on the reservoir that increased cost from another alternative did increase the cost of the project. Also, there was a significant, when you go out and do a planning estimate on the reservoir, and then you actually have you actually bid it out, and you happen to bid it out during a time of contractors had a lot of work, and the bid came back higher than we expected. So there were some planned increases, and then there were some just market fluctuations that you just can't avoid. You have to replace a reservoir that was built in 1885. So there is some of that, definitely. There's multiple points, though, I would say. We have a couple of things going on. I would like the customers and those watching to understand what we're dealing with. I'd like to say from a cost perspective, the plant board itself has done, I would say, a good job of containing cost. That is part of the equation. When you look back over the last 10 years, we've been running about 3% increase in cost on the water division over the last decade, which I know it's been a pretty stable stable inflationary environment in that 10 years, but we've managed to keep costs under control. Another part of that is sales. the plant board has continued to see a decrease in water usage by our customer base over the last decade. I put some numbers down here that I was looking at. I thought this might come up, and I was kind of curious to look at it. Just in the last 10 months, we've seen a 1.2% decrease in usage. In the last actual year, 1.7 decrease. Over the last 3 years, a 2.46% annual decrease in usage. So when you have a decrease in usage, most of your costs are fixed, 90% of your costs are fixed, and then you have rising cost, operating cost, you are going to have a situation where you have to make a rate adjustment. And another piece of that equation is that the plant board has invested, it's a $7 million reservoir, which was just no choice had to happen. And we've also chose to invest $3 million in smart meters for the water division. So we delayed 2 of the 5 years of increases because the idea is if we don't have to raise rates to our customer owners, we don't want to. As Connie mentioned, I think we're asking for, and the study projects a 2.5% increase in rates year over year for the next 5 years. There is a chance that we would need more than that, and if so, we'd come back to the board and ask for it. I know that we're doing our part internally on cost containment to try to avoid that side of the equation, but I'd also like to talk, to the community at large. I think any pro-growth opportunities we have in this community, city, county level, our service territory to increase growth, increase water sales due to our cost structure would take pressure off of our water rate trajectory. So growth would help us, just like it would most government agencies and school systems. So that's a long answer, Mr. Mason, but I think that kind of summarizes where we are, how we got to this point. And in an 8-9% year-over-year inflationary environment, things could be a lot worse. So at 64 cents per month for residential customer, it's about the lowest impact we think we could bring. We have to do something. So,
John?
David actually kind of talked about some of the things I was going to mention in talking about, the reason why I like putting this on the customer charge for the most part. I know there's a slight increase in terms of the industrial. A lot of times with the residential and, appliances are using less and less water. People are using less and less water. Shower heads and toilets and dishwashers and all sorts of manner of things are becoming more and more efficient. You've got a situation here in Frankfurt where you've got large state office buildings that are they're lucky to be at half capacity. So, you're at the point where you used to have 10,000 people in a building. Now you're lucky to have 3,000 or 4,000 people in a building if you got that. So if the water's just not getting used, and it makes so much more sense to me, and I understand the study, to put that on to the customer charge rather than some kind of volumetric rate, because I don't think the volumetric rate, absent growth, the volumetric production we're not going to sell more water unless we grow. That's the only way we've got to do it, and I don't think we can hinge our future on an increase in the volumetric rate. So that's.
And I guess the other situation is bottom line is water stands by itself, electric stands by itself, telecom stands by itself. So we're not taking money from electric to subsidize the water rate or vice versa. So this rate increase is for water. It's not for electric, for next band or anything else. It is to support the water. And like I said, I don't think anybody in this current economy is looking for ways to increase costs, but to have clean drinking water, reliable, for 2 cents more a day is not a terrible investment. And as John said, if we could sell more water, unfortunately our fixed cost, would you say, Gary, is 90% of our charge? It costs X dollars to run the treatment plant, to make sure the water's clean, deliver it, keep the lines. If we had more water, the cost per gallon would go down, but we've got to deal with.
And one other thing, and Connie, you kind of undersold it a little bit, but I can speak a little more openly than you can. I guarantee you the Kentucky American's rate is not going to be $33.85 5 years from now. I guarantee you that's not going to be the case. We're still going to be way under where they are. So I feel great. I feel very confident in making that statement. So.
Jason, Catherine, you had a,
Literally just to emphasize what you all have been saying, I mean, the positive thing, because we don't want to put a damper on anybody doing water conservation
No.
at all.
No.
It's a great thing.
Right.
And combined with, we have more capacity.
right.
We just need growth,
Yep.
so.
Jason, do you have anything you want to add?
Yes, good job.
Thank you.
Very
Steve?
in-depth research.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we accept the cost of service allocation study as presented by Gannett Fleming. Thank them for their efforts.
And do we have a motion, a second? We have a motion second, and make sure everybody understands what we do by accepting it is literally that, we're saying we've received the report, we've had a presentation, and we've accepted. So, and then the next item is where we'll talk a little more, but by accepting it, we mean that we have the report in front of us and it's now a public record. So, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Report's been accepted. Next item is 6.2, consider approving a request for public hearing regarding the proposed rate increases July 1st, 2022. Gary?
Yes. This is based on the study you just presented. Staff will ask you to schedule a public hearing for the rate. That will be the May 31st, 5 p.m. So,
And that's the same day, that'd be at the end of, we've got a budget work session that day, which is public. And at the end of that budget work session, then we'll what, adjourn that or recess it, go into the public hearing on this, and then have the public hearing, and then we'd consider those rate increases for final action at the June board meeting, correct? Okay. So, we have the motion to, schedule that public hearing for May 31st. Do we have a motion?
I do have a question, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
sir.
before you do. The budget meeting, when is the budget meet, what the time is the budget meeting? That's the afternoon, isn't it?
1 o'clock, isn't it?
Yes, sir,
Okay.
1 PM, and then this would be at 5.
Okay. Well, do we want to say we can have it at 1 PM? Because, you know, I know that meeting's gonna last a long time, but if it only lasts till 4, and we say the meeting's gonna be at 5, I'd
reverse it?
rather not wait around for an hour. I'd rather go ahead and have it at the beginning of that 1 o'clock meeting and do it
Yeah.
that way.
We would prefer that as well.
Okay.
I think the public aspect is why we put it at the end, but
Yeah,
I would love to do it early.
I understand that, but I gotta be honest with you, I think that I think we give folks enough ways to, we give all sorts of comments are out there, and if somebody's watching this meeting now, they can go on our website, they can see this thing. I feel we'll have it up there tomorrow if we don't have it up there already. They can look at the study, they can look at the recommendations. They're gonna understand what's going on, and I think we've explained it in pretty good details what's out there, so, it doesn't bother me that much to do it then, so.
Is it okay with everybody if we move that
And-
to 1 o'clock?
Right.
For the public hearing? And then
Right.
we'd adjourn that, and then we go right to the budget session. Cause
Yeah.
Steve wants to pull an all-nighter on the budget.
That'll all be the same meeting, though,
Right,
so,
Steve?
right, yeah, so.
Yeah, I do.
Yep.
I'm traveling that night anyway.
So the motion is to have the public hearing on the water rate adjustment on May 31st at 1 o'clock.
At the 1 o'clock meeting, yes.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion second. Without any further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? So we'll have the hearing on May 31st, 1 o'clock. And then immediately preceding that, we'll go into the budget work session.
Yes.
Okay, item 6.3, and this is what I just referred to. Brandon, you want to tell us about the increase, the contract and the increase in chemicals?
Do it. So, this portion of the packet's on page 185 to 187. Staff prepares an annual bid for the chemicals used in water treatment. The bid includes estimated quantities and explains that orders could exceed or fall short of the estimates. Vendors bid with the understanding that the bid's purpose is to hold unit price throughout FPB's fiscal year. This bid received 11 reverse auction bids. After reviewing each bid, staff recommends awarding to the lowest bidder meaning specifications with the exception of powder activated carbon, which is based on quality testing. So for the first one, liquid ferric chloride to PVS Technologies for 17.8 cents per pound. Excuse me. Liquid sodium hydroxide to Univar for 28.81 cents a pound. Polyaluminum chloride to Usalco for 31 cents a pound. Number 4, powder activated carbon. That we haven't got the test results back for that, so we just ask that you pass that when the test results come back. We should get those in the next, hopefully, couple of days. So for hydrofluorosilicic acid to Univar for 30 cents per pound. Potassium permanganate to Kimbrite for $2.54 a pound. Sulfuric acid to Brentag for 18.5 cents a pound. Zinc orthophosphate to Chemical Resources to $1.23 a pound. And I'll answer any questions if you have them.
I'll make one clarification real quick. What Brandon's talking about on the powdered activated carbon is based on a test as which one is more efficient at removing the items, and that test has not been done. So I think what we're asking tonight is the board pass, if they approve this bid, 1745, that the board would make the note that they would pass that with the stipulation that once we receive the test on the powder activated carbon, that we choose the best test and move forward.
You want to do it that way, or do you want to put it on the agenda for the 31st?
And that would be the other option we could do. We can move it to the 31st or even the next month.
June, I'll be coming back for the salt for that.
I mean,
so
is it time
anyway.
sensitive in terms of locking in a price?
Well, we have 90 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
What's the board's preference in terms of?
I'd prefer to wait till the test came back. you know,
Okay.
if you don't mind, if y'all don't mind.
No,
So the
that's fine.
motion would
That's
be.
fine. We're just waiting on the test. They're having a problem with their test equipment.
Sure.
So
So the motion would be to approve these bids.
yes.
And on the powdered activated carbon, that would be put on, assuming the test results are back, to put that on the agenda for May 31st.
Well, I could do it May or June either.
Whichever one you.
Okay.
Whenever you have it ready, whenever you're ready to present, it's fine.
Okay.
Either
All
one's
right,
fine.
That's fine.
Okay. So do we have a motion?
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
The sodium chloride is got, there's some asterisk next to it, but there's no footnote on that. Is that one that we have to hold over and rebid, or?
For the sodium chloride, when we did our original reverse auction bid, we didn't get a response for that.
Okay.
So we went and put out a sealed bid, and we
Okay.
didn't get a response again. So there
Okay.
was some miscommunication between somebody handing something to somebody. So we'll actually
You'll bring
open that-
back bids on that one then?
Yes, that bid will be
Okay.
open on Monday. with
Okay,
that,
good.
So
Good, all right.
Sorry, I just have a question.
Sure.
Okay, keep it brief. You know, obviously, I know nothing about water treatment chemicals, so I just have a question. Are these really just, you're picking the lowest amounts, but are these really apples to apples? Like, there slight deviations in the chemical composite, or are they all meeting a national standard?
well, they have to be NSF approved, UL approved, and they have to meet our specs also.
Okay.
So it's pretty much apples to apples except for the carbon, and that's why we do the testing. So there is a big difference between those. So
And then all of these companies are well established. There won't be a transportation issues or delivery issues.
we haven't run into any yet,
Okay.
but we've dealt with every single one of them. But I think we've dealt with all of them in the past. So
Okay. One last question. And how much do you keep on hand? Like a month's supply, 2 months? Like how much do you have on stock? Or do you?
it just depends on what we're using. So it's pretty much weather dependent. If there's a lot of rain, we're going to be using a lot of chemical. So most of these have, for most of them, we have 2 storage tanks, which can hold up to about 6,000 gallons apiece. So sometimes 12,000, and sometimes
Okay,
less.
thanks.
So we keep them
Thank you.
stocked up pretty well. So,
Okay,
so we
thank
don't
you very
run
much.
out. So.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve bid invitation 1745 as listed in the report given to the board, with the exception of the powdered activated carbon, which will be taken up at a later meeting.
Do we have a second? We have a motion second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Approved. Next one is item 6.4, consider award of bid invitation number 1750, annual price contract for liquid ammonium sulfate.
So this was a sealed bid that we had. We didn't get a response on our reverse bid. So staff prepares an annual bid for the chemicals used in water treatment. This bid includes estimated quantities and explains that orders could exceed or fall short of the estimates. Vendors bid with the understanding that the bid's purpose is to hold unit price throughout FPB's fiscal year. The bid received one sealed bid auction. After reviewing each bid, staff recommends awarding the lowest bidder meeting specifications with the exception of the powder activated carbon, which is based on quality testing. And this one, the one bid came from Brentag for 24 cents.
Have any questions? If not, do we have a motion?
So this one has to be done now, because we took the fiscal year.
Yes, this was just a sealed bid. We didn't get any responses
Didn't
from
get
the
any
first
reverse
reverse bid, so.
We have a motion? Did you make a
So-
motion,
so
Steve,
moved.
or
So moved.
Brent? Jason?
Yeah.
Motion
moved.
second?
Second.
Okay. You got all that, Kathy? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Approved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next one, item 6.5, consider award of bid invitation number 1748, number, was it 1/0 underground cable to Irby in the amount of $54,600, and number 4/0 underground cable to Brownstown in the amount of $72,750. Jennifer?
Good evening. We prepared a bid for the two different sizes of underground cable, and this is a normal inventory item and just needs to be replenished as, new construction or replacement of damaged cable. We sent to 10 vendors, advertised as normal. We received the 4 responses that are on the tab sheet. For item 1, we recommended Irby. They were the lowest, they have it in stock, and they met our specs, so that one worked out great. Item 2, we would recommend Brownstown. The low bid, again, as I think I had one last month, the same situation. They had a longer lead time, and they put the clause in that the price would be dependent on any escalations to the shipping date.
Are we seeing more of that?
With some vendors, some haven't done it yet. There's some vendors who do put that in on a lot of items.
So if you award it to
So-
them, then it would be kind of like surprise when you get the
Yeah,
invoice.
we would have no idea what, especially, some might say just to the order date, so, like, we might, if we're gonna send the order tomorrow, there's not as much of but when they have that long of a lead time and they're saying shipping date, you could be talking sometime next year that they come up with their price.
So they're treating it not so much
So
as
it's
a
really-
bid. It's more of
yeah.
a suggestion than a
Right.
bid.
And at this point, we don't know if
Right.
did they really even give us a correct price?
Right.
Because they could,
Right.
they're gonna go by what it is at
But
shipping.
we locked in on the two where you're recommending, we're locked in on the prices,
Those are,
correct?
yes, by the date of order, which I will send those tomorrow if they're
Good.
awarded.
Great.
Any questions of Jennifer? Hey, do we have a motion?
I make a motion to accept bid invitation 1749.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Contract's awarded. Jennifer, next item is item 6 point, make sure I call the right number. Item 6.6, consider.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I misspoke. I was looking at the wrong one. I made a motion for this one instead.
Okay.
I wanna
We just
call
passed
back.
it, right, John?
We just passed it, yeah. I wanna go ahead and reconsider the motion to
By which we approved.
But I'd like to reconsider the motion or reconsider the vote by which we
We
just
passed
approved
6.5?
1749. And hold that back.
Okay,
And instead, I'd like to make a motion that we approve 1748, which Jennifer just talked about with the cable.
okay. So the motion is for item 6.5, bid invitation number 17448 to approve. Do we have a motion?
Yes, so moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion, which we sort of had? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Contracts awarded.
Now we move 1749. Sorry about that, Mr.
And you
Chairman.
can present it, Jennifer, although we've already approved it.
Okay, so this was a bid for metal poles, which is, again, another inventory item, just replenish new construction or damage. We sent to 10 vendors, we received 6 responses, and the lowest bid, is the one that we're suggesting to award to, and that is Brownstown.
What are you seeing on those prices? Are they,
The metal poles are higher than like previous orders, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, the metal poles are higher. I looked, I did look at we haven't bid the 85-foot for several years. The 80-foot we bid in November, and they're about $1,000 more a pole on this bid from November. So the 85, I mean, it would have been 7 years or so back. That wouldn't have been a good comparison.
right, yeah. Do we have any questions for Jennifer on this? If not, all those do we have a motion for approving bid invitation number 1749?
So moved.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Did you get it, Kathy?
No, I didn't get a second.
Jason was smooth like in an auction, like bidding on stuff. That way, if he didn't want to buy the painting for $3 million, he could always say, I didn't bid on it.
I just rubbed my nose.
We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Contract's awarded.
Thank you.
Jennifer, thank you. Harvey, it's been too long since we've seen you, buddy.
I missed you last month.
Yeah. Item 6.7, consider accepting minutes of the December 14th, 2021 Cable Advisory Committee.
Yes, sir. Those are presented for your acceptance on page 197.
Any,
Motion to approve.
I was going to ask any
No, sir.
major issues or any things that, okay. We have a motion for John. Do we have a second?
I just have a general
Sure.
question. So this was back in December? Is
Yeah,
there
so
a reason?
Right, so they meet quarterly, and so we generally have them approve their minutes and then bring them to you guys for acceptance. I probably would have brought them last month, but since I didn't have anything else,
Okay.
I waited till this month.
Would there be an exception, Harvey, kind of following up on Catherine? Like say in December, they had saw something really major they wanted to recommend, point out, pass on. Do we, as a policy matter, would we have been able to bring that to January even though they hadn't approved their minutes?
Well, I mean, certainly, I will present to you guys their recommendations prior to the minutes being approved, right?
Right.
So if there's an agreement for y'all's approval,
Okay.
that they had made a recommendation on, that'll be part of that information, but, generally, like I said, we have them approve their minutes and then y'all's acceptance, but.
And John, there were a couple of instances when I was chair of the Cable Advisory Board back 15 years ago or so. There were a couple times I attended when the John Higginbotham at that time made the recommendations. We brought the recommendations to the board forward. I imagine that would still be the case on something
Right.
big, but,
Okay, so do we have a motion to accept the minutes? I think, do we have a second?
Jason.
Jason? We have a motion second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Minutes are accepted. Okay, item 6.8. Mr. Baxter wants to be considered to be reappointed to the advisory committee.
Yes, sir. Staff recommends approval of the reappointment of Clay Baxter to a second 3-year term on the advisory committee through April 30, 2025. The bylaws specify members can be reappointed once to serve on the committee. Mr. Baxter has been a key contributor during his first term. He's previously served as the committee's chairperson, and so we would recommend that the board approve his reappointment to the advisory committee.
And his letter is attached for information that he submitted to us. Do we have a motion to reappoint Mr. Baxter?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second. Okay, we got a motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Mr. Baxter's reappointed.
Thank you all.
Item 6.9, Nichelle. Consider approving Kentucky mandates for coverages of telehealth services.
Good evening, Board Chair and members of the board.
Staff recommends revising FPB's health plan to meet the requirements of the Kentucky mandated changes for coverages of telehealth services with the effective date of 1/1 of 2022. Changes include, but are not limited to, the removal of any exclusions for audio-only encounters, paying telehealth services as any other in-person services, and removal of any state of emergency coverage requirements. The benefit confirmation from MedBen is located in the detail pages on page 201. Staff asked the board to approve the recommended Kentucky mandated changes to the telehealth services.
And you're saying mandated, these are mandated by state law?
Yes.
Is there any cost impact to making these changes that you think will happen, or?
No, because currently, as far as like paying telehealth services as any other services, currently our plan offers it, the benefit at zero cost. So we're already taking on majority of the cost. So no additional.
Any questions to Michelle about this? Okay, if not, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Changes are adopted. Now, on the next one, item 610, consider changes to compensation plan. What I would propose here for consideration before Nichelle presents is obviously this has a cost impact, and on May 31st, we'll be back here. So we need to look at this. We need to see if we want to proceed with this, and then how in fact we handle it, whether we do these first and then do any COLA the board might approve, or do the COLA first, then do this. So as I understand, you're going to present it, and then we'll defer, or propose to defer actually, if that's what the board wants to do, and then adopt this. And so Kathy, if you could make sure, enhance the agenda is written in such for the board meeting on the budget work session, that we have the authority, if that's what the board wants to do, to consider this item 6.10 and adopt it in terms of whether we want, how we want to approve this, so it can be rolled into whatever budget we proceed with. Or we can adopt it, it's whatever you all want to do, but I think it might be budgetarily easier, and you're going to get us some information between now and then in terms of some different options, how it would price out.
Correct.
And then at that point, because right now in the budget, you've given us the draft, David, this proposal's not in there, is that correct?
That's correct. If you see on page 16, there's the payroll summary at the bottom box. It would have a breakout of what's contributing to the, and you'll notice scale changes is not listed there.
Okay, so that's for discussion after you present it, but that's one way to proceed, but however y'all want to do it, so, Michelle?
So as you mentioned tonight, this would just be informational, because I'm going to bring additional information to the board for the budget meeting. I'm working with the finance director to help figure out the figures. But on July 1st of 2021, FPB's current salary scale was adjusted. Staff asked the board to consider an additional adjustment to the current salary scale for the 22-23 budget year due to rising inflation, difficulty hiring qualified candidates, and the scale adjustment is just necessary to offer competitive wages to attract and retain employees. So I will be bringing additional information, more figures to the board prior to the May 31st budget meeting.
And this would affect primarily employees at the early stages, this career?
Anyone that is at the minimum of their grade. So
Okay.
yes, because when we move the scale up, they'll fall below the minimum, and they need to be at least the minimum of the grade.
And the other item that Michelle is going to be talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, and Hans, again, stop me if I'm, is at the budget meeting on the 31st, we also have to deal with, depending on the COLA we adopt, that there's some employees, depending on how far out they are in their career ladder, would not receive the full salary adjustment of whatever COLA we adopt.
It'd max out.
Correct.
They'd max out.
Right.
So the question is, Michelle's also looking at some different options, so that those employees might get all or more of the increase than what they might otherwise get because they're at the maximum of the grade. But again, that's gotta be priced out, and we don't have those figures yet. And Michelle, you and David are working to also have that for May 31st. Cause that all fits in, is that correct?
Correct. I'm actually working with Katrina, but
Okay.
with finance, yes.
But I mean, so that's all, so we've got several salary pieces in play for May 31st. And the board will have those options and fiscal impacts before we meet on the 31st to decide how the board wants to proceed.
Correct. Yes, sir.
So,
Do you have any questions concerning?
and if we don't do this, playing devil's advocate, if we don't do this, the impact is that are, based on this cost of study, that the classifications that we try to stay competitive with will fall behind. Is that correct?
Correct. We're currently having difficulties. We've been asking Gary to, if we have a certain candidate, if we can hire them in at more than a minimum, and we've had the candidates still decline. So it's just showing us that we're not as competitive with some of the surrounding agencies.
What are some of the classifications that's happening in?
That it was facilities management. We had some difficulties hiring for the safety field assistant. We're currently having difficulties hiring for the apprentice cable installer. And I don't know, but Spectrum, they just announced that their starting rate is like $20.
What's happening with like Kentucky American, Kentucky, KU, Louisville Water, those kind of companies? Do we have any idea what, I know the city's proposed, and this is more of our budget hearing, but the city's talking about what, 5 plus 3, is that correct?
I'm not for sure.
Something like that in terms of, Gary?
I heard there are some discussing for their budget number, but they're going to present to us commission soon.
And we don't know
I
what.
heard a total number, but it's not confirmed. It's
Right.
a decision for commission. Preliminary, I heard like 8% total budget.
And that's what the
But
state's
I can't
getting.
speak for them.
And that's what state government's getting.
Yes.
And we haven't heard anything what county or the schools, or county government or the schools, or.
County just have the same consultant done quite a bit of study. They present to the county, but I don't know the decision.
Right. The city and the county did a conversation study with our consultant Blair Johansson. So even if their cost of living isn't high, it's because they have just moved their salary grades or did a study to make their positions competitive.
And they've
Or
already
that's
made
my
those
belief.
and they've already made those adjustments in this fiscal year?
I haven't had confirmation. I know they were still working on their conversation study with Blair Johansson.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Nichelle, is there a uniform jump here in terms of percentage between, for example, does grade 102, the minimum for 102, is it the same percentage as the increase we're looking at the jump for 113?
So
I don't think it is from
No.
what I look at.
No, so grades 102 to 107 is increased by 85% from the midpoint.
Okay.
We did that because those were some of the grades that we were having difficulties hiring for.
Okay.
And then grade 108, the increase was 83%. And the difference for that grade is because there was some compression between grade 101 and 103, and we wanted to make sure we address that. And then grades 109 to 124 is 80%.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Nichelle? Is that acceptable to you all to
Pass over this?
take no action
Yep.
on this, and it will be on the agenda along with a lot of exciting topics on May 31st. But so, I mean, we've got a lot of salary issues to sort through on the 31st, so, we don't have to take any action to pass over this, do we?
No.
Yeah.
So, Nichelle, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And look forward to seeing you on the 31st.
Okay, yes, sir.
I know you're looking forward to it too.
Yeah.
About like a root canal, huh? Next item is item 7.1, update on community solar, and add the caveat on this one also. This one also is somewhat similar to the salary issue in that I think the board has expressed a commitment to move forward. And at the budget meeting on the 31st, we need to lock in what kind of budget figure we want to put in initially, what kind of caveats, based on what kind of interest we get, what type of cost figures, and to lock in a final figure at that meeting also. So that's why this is on for information, that at the budget meeting, we'll have to take a look at what final number we want to put in here. So Travis?
All right, good evening again, everyone. Craig, I think, is trying to join us through Zoom, but maybe having some audio issues, it seems like, so we'll let him I think he's working to see if he can get them resolved or perhaps call in. While he's working on that, I'll just kind of run through a quick recap, and then we can talk about next steps and what we need to do to, again, get everything lined out for the budget meetings to move forward. One of the questions that came up when Craig was presenting the community solar report at the last meeting was, how can we possibly take advantage of the tax credits? I think that was one of the ones that came up early in the discussion. Done some research on that. Craig has done quite a bit of research to help provide an update on that. What he's been able to find so far, there's a couple approaches other utilities have taken to that issue to try and take advantage of those tax savings. Number one, have a private developer build the facility, and then you sign a PPA, then they take advantage of the tax credits. I think that's probably not preferred for us. Number one, because we kind of lose control of the facility at that point if you're doing a PPA. We also think there's perhaps KYMEA issues with that approach. May not necessarily be in good faith to sign a PPA with a project developer. So we think that's probably not the best option for us. The other option would be, and hopefully Craig can jump on, he can probably explain it much better than I can, but would be to do what would be called what is the acronym here? Okay, it is a tax equity flip structure. Essentially, we looked at a utility. They formed an LLC and worked through the tax equity partner, which allowed them to monetize the tax credits. The LLC owned the array, and so under the agreement, the utility was essentially kind of paying itself for electricity generated. Somewhat complicated approach. The idea we had kind of kicked around internally with staff and talking to Craig. We think that's possibly an option we could look into when we go out to bid. Perhaps that's something we include in an RFP document, put that burden on the developer to come up with ideas, make proposals to us that we could consider at that time and see if it makes sense. I think one of the big challenges may be the size of the facility. I think could be an obstacle to take advantage of that. You know, is it going to be hard to get a developer to, you know, work with us on that for this size of project? So I think the only way we could really answer that is through perhaps an RFP. So I think that's the idea there. Another big point of discussion.
Hey Travis, I'm on. Can you hear me?
I've got you now, Craig. I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay. Did I mess any of that up?
No, I think I caught you towards the end of the tax equity flip, so
Okay.
I think you actually did it quite well.
Alrighty. Thank you for that.
Can I ask a quick question on
Yeah,
the tax
sure.
equity flip? Is that, that's the tax credit and accelerated depreciation? Do you get both through that, or is it just the tax credit?
Yeah, basically the way tax equity flips work is in the first few years of the operation, 99% of all the costs and revenues would go to the tax equity partner, and that's usually when they're recovering their the tax credits. And then once they've made their contractual return, or IRR, whatever the agreement is, it flips back to 95% the utility and 5% the tax equity partner. So basically, it almost all goes to the tax equity partner until they've made their money back, and then it flips back to the utility.
Okay. What states did you find, like, where is this being done generally?
I think that's been done all over. I mean, I worked on a project that's in Louisiana for a big carbon capture sequestration. Let me look at know that I have it on which states were doing it for solar. I don't think I have that on the presentation. We answered some of the questions.
Yeah, I think one was in Wisconsin, maybe. Does that sound right, Craig?
Yeah, the Eau Claire, St. Croix, New Richmond. I think those were all similar to tax equity flips. Yeah.
Okay. Will you be the first in Kentucky to look at something like this?
As far as I'm aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Travis or Hans, what would be the steps if we wanted to go that route in terms of just legally putting together the deal and selling it? And
I think I would be concerned about third-party involvement with any of these structures. the KYMEA issue is one thing we need to sort out. Your PPA with KYMEA, like Travis talked about, that's your exclusive power provider, the
Right.
all requirements contract, of course. You can structure it through KYMEA as a member-owned generation resource project, but it has to be owned by the member. And when you start having a third party own it and develop it, that's one layer that creates some issues there, because we don't own the project. They're the owners of it. They're taking advantage of those credits if that's what they need to do. And creating an LLC that owns the array, that brings up some other questions as far as ownership goes of it. That's key. And the second thing that you talk about, one of the things is pushing the tax credits to the customers. That gets you into the whole securities issue of that customer's getting a profit as close as you can keep these models to the traditional purchase of electricity. There's no expectation of profit. In fact, some of these projects are structured to where you pay a premium for the solar because there is no expectation of profit. That's just one factor. I sent the board a kind of a memo about some of the securities concerns. There's an exemption for the securities laws that say, well, if you're some people say, well, as you're a municipal utility, you're exempt from all these laws. That I don't know if you meet whether you're quote unquote political subdivision. That's kind of a term of art that has some issues surrounding it. There's a lot of, y'all probably seen some of that in your experience with state government. What who is a political subdivision is a pretty good question. So those are some things that would be worked out.
How big a difference does that pricing, does the tax benefits make in terms of getting,
No.
how big a deal is that in terms of people participating and buying in?
Oh, well, it's about a 50% reduction in the cost of the system, if all things being equal. Is that what, Travis, is that what you were coming up with?
Yeah, Craig, I don't know if we came out with a percentage, but yeah, I think.
I mean,
it's a number.
the ITC, the investment tax credit itself is 30%.
Right.
So that's where most of the savings flows through.
Well, it's just 26 right now, but it sunsets at the end of the year, I think, to 22, but.
I'm just wondering, say 1,000 people want to buy in, or 500 people. Would, if you had those tax advantages, would that mean that an extra 500 people does it make it more attractive that more people, does it change the mix or the number of people wanting to buy in or participate early on?
Well,
I'm just asking,
I mean, anything that lowers the cost is probably gonna make it more, gonna make it more enticing.
That's, I'd like to lean in just to understand, like, I think before at the last meeting, and sorry, wild numbers here, but if we were talking a little bit higher than our current rate, let's say the solar was 9.5 cents, but then if we cut the half of the project in half, in theory it drops down to 4.25 5 cents for that same power if you're passing it through to the customer. You were saying that there's some issues with that as a model?
Yeah, it goes back to there's 4 factors that are typically used to evaluate is what you're offering to the public. Is it a security that has to be registered, and do you have to make continuing disclosures with it? And that gets into the expectation of profit. That one factor is, do you have are you investing your money to try to make something off of it, to try to make something from the efforts of others? That's sort of the legal test as to whether it is you're trying to make a profit off of that. The idea that, well, I'm trying to get, I'm getting 4 cent, cheaper power. I'm investing in this to make a profit. I'm investing in it to get a cheaper cheaper power price.
Sorry, the customer's investing in it, or we are investing in it?
Well, that's a good question. Okay. That's an excellent question of who is, who's investing in it. What's going to be the structure, as far as who is the, who's going to be the investors. That's one question that we need to be kind of fleshed out as we go. And also, when you talk about who's going to be, one other idea that how many people are going to be interested in it. That's a good question. If you're trying to collect money up front, if you're trying to subscribe it, in advance, if if whoever it is, if it's if it's this LLC or if it's the plant board, if they're fronting the money, that's less of an indication that it's a security, because you're just, you know, we're putting all the money in, and that's that. But if you're trying to sell these, you know, sell these shares or sell these subscriptions in advance to collect the money to determine what you're going to construct, that kind of gives it more of a security type of a flavor. So.
Well, and then there's another element that we brought up last time, but I didn't know if there's an answer to. Say we do it without the tax credits and we have something like a 20-year return on investment for the system, but the system lasts for 30 or 40 years. What are we selling that power for once we've paid off the investment and it's free power? Do we sell it at all? Do we just internalize it? Do we sell it to customers? That may bring, do we sell it at the same rate that we had sold it? Was there a good answer to that, or do you guys have some thoughts on that?
I think the way I look at that, if you have people that under the ownership method bought into the system, they would have paid off their investment in theory, and they would continue getting the credits on their bill. And if they went the monthly route, and we kind of discussed this, I think they would, whether it's $5 a month, I think under that scenario, you would either reevaluate that amount and lower it to a new monthly amount to factor in the remaining life of the asset. But I think for the people that, if they invested up front and hung on for 20 years, I think they should continue to get that energy credited on their bills after the life of the asset, if it's still continuing to run.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, our last meeting, you said the monthly was your kind of suggestion to how to look at this, because BMU did the upfront and they had a big fall off in their later phases, right?
I think the discussion was kind of off doing a hybrid.
A hybrid.
And then kind of maybe, I think we're still kind of preliminary in defining what the community is interested in and what would attract the most attention. So I think, it may be preliminary to pick one or the other at this point.
Okay, and then Hans, you're saying that there's a security question that kind of goes with one, but maybe not as much with the other, right?
Yeah, to the extent you can keep it as much as you can model it along, just it's a traditional paying your electric bill every month.
Okay.
That's what you want to get at. I wasn't on the call for the tax equity flip structure, so I don't know about how to structure the LLC and so forth, but I would shy away from getting third parties involved, because that raises the ownership questions with your PPA with KYMEA.
Okay.
But maybe that can be worked out.
Travis, is
somewhat.
Craig, what is the majority of these that have gone on in other states? What structure are they using?
The majority just do it at PPA, and a third party develops the site, constructs it, and they charge you a rate over.
So the majority
25 years.
The majority of states that are doing this are using a PPA?
I think the majority of municipal utilities that do this are simply, it's easier just to have someone else build it, construct it, and pay the developer the rate that comes out of that, yeah.
And the reason that we wouldn't go necessarily that traditional route is because of KYMEA.
If we own it, then you could, it'd be like contracting, I'm gonna contract with this developer to build me a solar project, but I own it. It's gonna belong to the Frankfurt Plant
Right.
Board. It's not gonna belong to that developer.
Right.
Then it can be a generation resource project, I think.
I think another complication you'll have is we're actually building this on our property. So if you bring another party in, now you've got to lease or work something out for that property to go to them, and debates on property rights.
And I don't know what's better. I
come
mean,
into play.
personally, I don't see that as a major hurdle, because you've got two state office buildings, Mayo, Underwood, and Sauer sitting here, that are state buildings, that are on state property, constructed by a private vendor. The state's paying lease payments. At the end of those lease payments, the state gets the building, and it's sitting on state property. And the state, is making the payments because they're charging rent to various state agencies who occupy it. And then the state is making the payment to the contractor who built it. And so clearly it was built by a private firm, but it's on state property, and the state will own that asset.
As long as KYMEA will be good with us with, the plant board is the owner.
Mhm.
I think what Vint points out is too, issue, the land ownership.
Right.
You know, that kind of
And
thing.
you
That
can do a
be
lease
worked
back
out.
on the land. I mean, the state does leases all the time for $1 a year for so many years. At the end, the state returns the lease back. Library, I mean, that
can
type
be
of,
worked.
not on solar, but that type of transaction on real estate is not unusual in state government. I mean, that's done, I mean, there's Fairgrounds does it on
Sure, you can do it.
hotels. I mean, Fairgrounds owns a bowling alley, or used to. I mean, there's ways to do it, so.
It can be structured, but the land, as long as I think I don't know, I think I've heard up here, I don't know whose land that's deeded to, up the hill here, just like right up there. I don't know if that's included in this
Yeah.
plot or not.
I mean, I would
That'd
say,
be-
this is just me, but if we were to build it on this property, then we would never give them title to that property.
Oh, that's absolutely.
I mean, we'd own the property, they'd lease it to us for the express sole purpose of building it, and we'd have exclusive use ownership of the asset, whatever was generated, and it would return back to us.
Yes, sir. That's simple enough. That's just like building this building on this property. We have a contractor build the building, it belongs to us. I think the tricky part is with the taxes.
Yeah.
The private party has to own the
Facility.
solar array to get the tax credits to pass along to somebody else. That's what creates the complexity to it.
Let me ask this one other question. If we went the PPA route, we put an RFP out, is there any reason to think if we go through a PPA to build it based on specs we want, and then the possibility of expanding it later if we have more, can they do it faster and cheaper than if we do the contract ourselves for a contractor to actually build it? Or can they build it cheaper, or can we build it cheaper to control the contract? Because we'd be we're tax exempt. I mean, is there any financial benefit? I mean, it might be easier to do a turnkey and say, go build it for us, but is it cheaper and faster, or is it just easier?
I don't know that I would have a PPA with the developer. I wouldn't have a purchase power agreement with the developer. I would have a contractor build the solar array for us. It would belong to us, and I would try to set it up as a generation resource project with KYMEA. I wouldn't have a PPA with the developer. I'd have a construction
Right.
contract I wouldn't be purchasing power from that developer.
Right.
They're gonna build it for us for X dollars, then we're gonna take that and use that as a generation resource project with KYMEA that we're in turn gonna somehow have subscriptions to.
So we'd still be letting the bids ourselves anyway?
Correct.
Okay.
But if they don't own that array, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, if they don't own that, if the third party or private entity does not own that array, there's not gonna be that tax credit available, correct?
Well, unless we do the option 2, which is to set up a LLC that's a
LLC,
for-profit, that's
right.
a subsidiary of the plant board. If I'm not mistaken, New Market tax credits, colleges and universities use it a lot. It actually is a very similar structure. Hans, is that correct? New Market tax credits, the way they're used by nonprofit colleges, they use it in a similar kind of way. Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
I've been in conversations where that's come up, where it's like, oh, that's exactly how we just built that building over there, you know? I do want to say one thing, just so we're all on the same page. This is not how utilities normally do stuff. This is not the traditional model. And I really do appreciate you all even considering this, because we're kind of being pulled into the future here on thinking through these issues. And I'm glad everybody is willing to grapple with this, because even in conversations where we're like, wow, we could actually start selling power cheaper to our customers than it's not how normally utilities are structured. So as we ease into this, and as we think as a nonprofit, suddenly building a for-profit, and all these kinds of things, I appreciate everybody kind of being flexible with this, because it's not the normal way utilities have operated for a very long time, so.
Can I ask you one other question, Ben? If we were gonna build, say we weren't putting everything on the side as far as tax credits, construction, PPA, if we were just gonna build this project, do we have not that our people aren't smart enough, do we have the expertise to design, build, oversee construction, or would we go with like a construction manager, similar like building a building or anything else? Would we do that internally, or would we go out and get a contractor to do the design, do the engineering, oversee the construction, obviously working for us. Can we do that in-house, or do we have to go outside and get a contractor?
My opinion is, since we've never built one like this, again, kind of staff's recommendation as we go through some of this stuff is to, you know, do it in phases if we're gonna do it rather than the whole site. I think you would wanna design the whole site, do phase one, then I think you would probably do that with a contractor, would be more comfortable with the workload we have and the folks we have. I think I would do that. Could we do phase 2, 3, whatever, if we had more? Probably we could at that point. I think once we see how it's done.
So a contractor could give us the design, the specs for a full project, and then we could, in theory,
to do the full site,
award phase 1, and then we'd have the specs and design for phase 2, 3, 4, whatever.
Continue
That we
the
could
other
operate,
phases.
we wouldn't be tied to going back to that contractor. We could go a different route if we wanted. If that's what the board
That
wants.
would be on the labor side of it. Ordering the materials, again, we probably would have access to order the materials most any place, and then our material order would be, you know, tax-free and everything.
Okay.
And one thing to consider with solar panel installation, like 65% of the cost is the panels, so labor is a smaller part of it, so. But I've always been told that it's pretty, once it's set up, it's pretty simple.
Can you mix
electrical
and match I mean, if you buy panels from ABC company, and then you decide to do phase 2 later, and company D now has got the best price, you don't have to, I mean, specs are specs, is that?
There's nothing, and my understanding is there's nothing, it's all apples, oranges, bananas and stuff like that. My understanding is the inverters, where it all starts to connect up, is around the inverters, and that's where you gotta have sort of everybody communicating with each other. The inverters are kind of what moves the power around and communicates. But obviously panels are changing constantly, so if you did a phase 1, 2, and 3, you probably would have different types of panels.
Yeah.
But
That's what we were kind of discussing, is trying to do the phases based on inverter size, and you would try to match your panels and everything for that inverter size or that phase you were gonna do, and try to keep all that the same. And then, depending on how fast things move, you could be a couple of years and your panels could be better, your different inverter technologies. They may set side by side, they may be tied to similar racks, but they would probably produce a little more energy per unit as time went on.
Travis?
I think that kind of leads us right into some of the questions on the size. Vin mentioned going by inverter. We had looked originally at a 570 kW system. That project that was proposed included 4 inverters, so I think if you wanted to maybe slice it up neatly, you would look at 150 kW phases. So that's kind of what we would propose as a phase 1 inverter, 150 kW. Which would lead into the discussion we touched on a little earlier with subscription levels. Now, of course, if we are able to get the facility fully subscribed prior to construction, that essentially would eliminate any risk to the rest of the rate base to paying the cost of a facility they're not using. It would also, you know, in a sense, kind of keep that cost per share down. So I think that's perhaps part of the next discussion is what's the right subscription level before we say go? Do we get it 100% subscribed and then we issue bids and we build that phase 1? Again, I think from the staff perspective, that's probably the lowest risk.
For 150 kW, how many subscribers is that?
Do you remember off the top of your head? It was
250
250?
is each, 250 is each.
That's 250
It's the size, but
subscribers.
it's 552 actual subscribers.
Okay.
552 subscribers.
For the 150.
For the 150 kW size, like a phase 1, which would be 250 watt shares.
And what's the cost of 150 kW?
We think that would be, David, I think that was in your chart. Let me scroll to it here.
Yeah, this page is anywhere from $1.91 to $2.37. So capital cost of $286,000 to $355,000 would be the 150 kW, somewhere in that range.
And then as you add another 150 kW, that multiplies so another 150 would then take you to
Be about 572 to 712, roughly.
Have you guys looked at all, like, a little bit of savings on some of those, the design is actually negotiating with utilities and stuff? Have you guys, there's some savings there?
I mean, it's a pretty wide range of, you know, $150,000, and so it's, I mean, there's a lot of things. You
Yeah.
know, the panel cost could change, yeah, if your full design is done, there's a bunch of things that could modify it a little bit one way or the other. I mean,
Yeah.
we found everything all over the board, from NREL to everybody at 190. We kind of set on 191 to about 237, but even the North Carolina estimate, North Carolina state estimate we had done, was it a year and a half ago or 2 years ago? It gave us a range of 190 to 240. I think 1898, their estimate was 237, you know, a conservative estimate, but we saw estimates at 191 from NREL, their most recent stuff, on a per watt. So we just kind of put a range together, but I think you could, I could absolutely argue for all kind of different.
No, it's all good. No, I appreciate it. And the later phases could be cheaper just because you've already done a lot of that. Maybe 10% cheaper because of all the groundwork and.
Well, Ms. Lindsay, you have your, I'm sorry.
John, once again, that, the number, and fixed back, we thrown a lot of numbers around. The number of subscribers for that 150 would be 250 subscribers to fully hit that, correct?
552 subscribers.
552 subscribers. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Ms. Lindsay, you have your pulse of the community.
Yes.
After you did a brilliant education campaign and explained this, and you went out and we wanted to subscribe phase 1, how many do you think we can get first pass?
Now we're putting you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of
Just round it to the 10 digit, 680, 690.
Yeah, just guessing's allowed.
We're
Go
not
for
trying
it.
to nail you down.
Yeah, I couldn't even venture to guess. I would say probably less than you all think.
Yeah.
Even at the $5, even at the $5?
Yeah.
Catherine, what do you think?
I'm too optimistic.
Well, if you were optimistic, what would you think?
I just think there's more than 552 people in our community that care about the environment.
And that would sign up for,
For $5.
yeah, Jason?
I think it has to do with a few things. One is that price point. Are we matching their price point and they're getting the environmental benefit? Are we actually going lower than their price point? Which, of course, then everyone's beating our door down, and we'd have to set a cap if you could only one share per person. I really think the price point is everything. If it's way higher than what they're currently paying, then I don't know. But $5 is, I think it's for people to feel good. And once again, what percentage of the average customer would that $5 cover of their total electricity load?
It's really depends. That's a 250 watt AC.
Yeah.
So,
Was it
depends on the region. I heard some of the studies shows between 18 to 38 kilowatt-hour monthly produced.
Yeah.
That's if you ask the benefit.
Okay.
That's based on the KU done their study. They charge $5.55, and but they are just not far from us. I assume the solar most likely produces a similar result, but their study shows 18 to 37 or 38 kilowatt-hour monthly.
37, I think.
37.
Because again, we're not voting on anything tonight, but I mean, one possible approach when we decide everything in the universe on May 31st would be to say if 552 is our number starting out, is to say if we start the education campaign, start signing people up, that as soon as we either hit 552 or half that number or 75% of that number or whatever, we'd let the RFP, we'd let the contract, we put a budget plug number in of X dollars, and we put an additional plug in that if subscriptions, say it takes off and we go 1,000, that we have the budget authorization to go on and proceed and build basically 300 kW, which would take 1,000 subscribers, that we include that budget, so it's budgeted. I mean, that's an approach to do it, to get the authorization in the budget and enough room to do the minimum project and to do basically a phase 1 and phase 2 in the current budget year, depending on how the education and the interest and so forth. And like I said, we don't have to decide any of that tonight, but we're gonna have to give David a number to plug. Catherine?
I would just encourage us or Gary or whoever, we've got to figure out the KYMEA thing, because we're just,
Yes.
we could just be wasting all our time.
But I think you're feeling decent about the KYMEA, don't you?
What the board already discussed about last time. I think the management don't have any concern issue. But the board of QMEA, some of them probably catch some of the meeting our minutes last time talked about.
Sure.
Actually, one of the suggestions is, can this be a KYME project? So some of the board member asking, can we build a bigger than for all the community, then can share that. But I'm not really sure that the individually each city what they would like to do. Right, end of the day, we don't know that yet.
Let me ask this,
So
if
have a board
KYMEA
discussion.
would wanna share it with us, what does that mean? I mean, I know it means we share it with, but I mean, what does practically that mean?
But a lot more likely to get billed. I mean, more availability, more potential
I think
subscribers.
it also reduces our risk. I mean,
Yeah.
you're fine with me, I'm an optimist, but I'm also very conservative when it comes to
Right.
making these types of investments. And
Right.
if KYMEA is involved, I think our risk bottoms
Go
out.
way
'Cause
down.
clearly there's 552 and maybe 1,000 across KYMEA.
Now, does that
that want
change,
it.
if we do a deal, a project, don't wanna say deal, bad word. If we do a project with KYMEA, does that mean we need potentially a different site, a bigger site, a different located, I mean, does that change any of the dynamics of the siting, or?
I'm not really sure. Each city have to choose how big their portion would be.
Right.
For example, currently, if you say assume just based on energy, we are 54%. So you potentially can double the size, if all the city involved that. But I'm not really sure that because
But we don't have to
I
work this
think,
out before May 31st. We can put in our budget,
Yeah.
and you can tell KYMEA we're open,
Yes.
to whatever, I don't know if we wanna decide on May 31st, if we have I mean, this is on for only information night. If we have a preference, if we wanna communicate with KYMEA that we're open to a joint project, or whatever the board's.
Well, and just one thing to keep in mind is, there's no reason we couldn't have multiple sites, because as long as you're plugging into a transformer or to a substation or transformer can handle it.
Well, we want it needs to be controlled by us.
So
So we
that's
don't
what I'm
get into
saying.
wheeling,
A
right.
site that we can control,
Right.
as long as we're wheeling into our own grid, if we can kind of plug it in different
Yeah.
areas, right? Vince? I'm not sitting here on fire over there, right? It's like, I mean, it's kind of, I keep using the word Lego blocks a little bit, but you could kind of link it into different parts of the system.
Yeah, I think your cost changes.
The
will
cost
change
changes a
significantly
little
if,
bit, yeah.
Right now, the land, there is no land cost in this particular
Of course.
option. So I think as you move it in a different site, you're gonna have to do the finances would change per site. So I think the thing to keep in mind is, I just would caution, I don't think we have to determine some great big site that would solve everything.
Right.
You can do phases, no matter what size you wanna pick, and you can expand or contract based on whatever interest our customers have. If it's a joint thing with KYMEA and all the other cities are involved, we can truly expand or contract based on what the real desire is from those folks that were participating. So I don't think we have to come up with this thing and decide we've gotta have, 5 megawatts, 1 megawatt, 570 or 150. I think just the idea that you start to do it and progress as the desire is there, you can obviously modify your budget at any point through the year whether you decided to do the full amount here, half or whatever. If your subscription level exceeds, even if you do the full amount, if your subscription level exceeds that, the board I would suggest would probably take up a new agenda item and discuss it and make adjustments to the budget and let new projects. We would have to come back, if we exceeded, again, I think staff has some concerns at the water treatment plant because of possible construction, but if we exceeded what was here, the staff we would be trying to identify new locations and come back to you with all those operations and then costs. And so, again, based on evaluating KU and LG&E's interest and Berea's interest in different places like that, it's about 1% of the customer base seems to be where generally is how many subscriptions you have. That may be totally different in Frankfurt, but generally that's what, if you go back and look at those in this region, that's what you get. So, you know, I would just caution to try to size it. If you're doing a capital outlay, at least start somewhere along there would be
One thing I
suggestion.
do want to say that even some of the board member KVME has an interest for this project, but I do want you to know Frankfurt has the most interest based on our community response in the past. I think other might have it, but I'm not sure how much, how big the demand from other cities.
Well, let me ask this then, for May 31st, just in a real, little simple budget nutshell, for May 31st, what we would need to have in front of us is a budget plug number, a process that we want to authorize staff to proceed on education, and what a subscription go, no-go date is. No go, no date, more so minimum or trigger level of subscriptions, and then continue to pursue a KYME option. That would get us in the budget with authorization for staff to work on the education, the subscription, proceed with KYMEA. We'd have the money in there, and as soon as we hit a prescribed trigger, we'd be ready to do an RFP, order the equipment, and get underway. Is that, from a staff standpoint, is that basically on the 31st what we would need to be giving you direction on? Vint?
I think for the 31st, we really need direction on the amount of money you want to put into the budget for the project. Not long after that, I don't think it has to be on the 31st, but not long after that, we kind of need to get an idea of what size you want to go with, if you want to do phases, and if you do, what size to make those phases, so that we can then start to put together design and engineering type things. Because again, we can't arrive at a price until we kind of bid the project and get that. So we can't get subscriptions. We can't go down that road until we make that happen.
And 150 kilowatt KW at 552, from a staff standpoint, is kind of what you all think makes sense in terms of break points for phases. Is that correct?
From a conservative, trying to make sure we don't, I guess our goal as staff is to make sure we don't have a situation where we have a large portion that may be unsubscribed, because then that goes to the rest of the rate base until it is subscribed. So our feeling would be kind of go smaller in phases to, you know, kind of guard against that. But again, that's just staff's opinion. It's a conservative financial way of doing it. And
But from a building initially, it doesn't make, am I correct? We don't want to build smaller than 150 KW, right?
You could, but I mean, based on what I heard of some engineer, probably correct answer, or you know, Travis can say that more. It is the commercial size of the in-water for the three-phase 480 is like 150. It's kind of standard size. Can you say I want to build 100? Yes, but you're going to deviate away from the standard size. You know, that's why. You can do any, but if you want a low cost, best in water, most reliable, you know, some of the consultants tell me, you know, choose 150 as your unit is probably the most wise thing to do. But you don't have to. Really.
Does that, Catherine, does that make sense to you in terms of, for what we'll be looking at on May 31st? We're not voting on anything, right? I mean, we're just trying to have a game plan on.
Yes, yeah, and I think that size also is like, what's your minimum financially feasible size? You know, like where it's not gonna make sense.
you could certainly take more risk with subscriptions, building it. If you had a smaller size, you would have a smaller capital risk, so it would be probably easier to, you wouldn't necessarily have to have 100% subscription rate maybe, because you would have less capital at risk, where if you went larger.
Yeah, but as there is economies of scale for sure. You start.
Oh yes,
You
absolutely.
get down to 80 watts, or 80 kilo. You start to have that 280 a watt, it starts to go up pretty fast, so,
What's our 1% customer base? What's the number?
About 55 kW roughly in that range.
So how many customers is that?
Yeah,
The 210, does that sound
I
right?
was gonna say 200 or
Yeah,
something.
21,500
Yeah.
electric customers total. So
Would people, if they wanted to sign up, would they simply just, maybe, 1898, do people, when you ask them to sign up, do they just sign up and say, I'm in, or do they have to put up $5 or $10, sign a contract, or just say, I want it, or is it any more
There's
formal?
usually an application fee that when they're signing up, that is kind of part of the sign up process that kind of gives them, I guess, a little bit of skin in the game, if you will, to say they're going to participate.
One thing you want to try to avoid is, if you're, like I kind of mentioned earlier, when you get payments up front, that gives it more of your selling. That was kind of one of my questions. You know, when Kathy goes out and says, hey, you know, what's your level of interest? Would you be willing to take, you know, pay $5 for, you know, a survey is one thing, but when you go out and Kathy collects, hey, says, give me your $5, that creates more of a security type.
If you call it an application fee, does that mean you're not selling a share?
I think if you get money, you're
even
treading a thin
even
line.
if you make it a deposit to like the first month's payment.
I think
Okay.
you're getting you're getting capital for your project, which gives it that risk.
Skin in the game is important.
Yeah.
Because, you know, everybody could tell you they want it, and then you come to open your wallet and.
Yeah, I mean, even if people put up $5, they at least, they
Even
said, I want,
$5, yeah.
I'm serious, I want to do something, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So,
What-
so wouldn't it be an expense, Hans, though? Is an expense considered, just an investment or?
My advice.
Intent to capitalize with money, because the application fee would be an expense on both sides. The fee makes it an expense on the person collecting it, and on the person paying it, it's an expense.
I wouldn't take money up front, based on the research I've looked at, you know.
The courts aren't gonna make the distinction, I think it's what Hans is afraid of, correct?
It's a very all this stuff kinda, you change the facts, you change your answer, but if you get money up front, you're setting yourself up. You're given, if you say, I didn't take money up front, the inquiry stops right there, if it ever becomes a question. Once we kinda know the size, we've talked with our bond counsel a little bit to see, you know, but these are just kind of generalizations. There's a Supreme Court test, and that's what this comes from, and then there's state law questions as well, so.
Yeah. So Hans, what if we took like a shoe or something, if they gave us one of their shoes, would that? Just teasing.
I'll take some old run shoes.
I'm just thinking the shoe they're wearing, so that, you know.
We can
I do
eBay 'em later.
want to say, Catherine, thank you for your leadership on
Yeah.
this and the vision. And then also staff, there's nothing easy. You guys have a million things you're already doing, and then we're like throwing this at you too. So thank you very much. Hans, thank you. Vint, thank you very much. So excited to see where this goes.
Well, see, my idea would be just approve it on May 31st, and then tell staff to work on it, and then invite us to the ribbon cut.
We'll be more involved than that.
well, and maybe one of the things is, and it would totally be voluntary, is to have your name on a list. And maybe just the fact that your name's on the list and not wanting it to be removed.
At a public ceremony to remove your name?
Well, you could have a plaque.
Yeah.
Your first 100 people have their
Yeah.
name on the plaque. That's a great idea. That'd
We'd
be
also
good.
have a separate plaque of those who had their name on and didn't pay.
The Walls plaque of shame. Okay.
Travis, do we have anything else from 1898 that we need to cover?
Thank those guys too. They
Craig,
did a
not that
great
I can
job.
recall. I think
They
we
did
hit
a
the
great
big
job.
topics. You remember anything else we're leaving off?
David,
I
what else?
think that covers it.
David, what else do you need that we need to be prepared to give you direction on the 31st regarding this matter?
Number.
We currently have $750,000 as a plug for now, so I think we're good with.
And that covers that would cover phase 1 and phase 2 if we stay with the 150 kW 552 per phase model.
Yes, sir.
That would cover 1,100 subscribers.
Yes, sir, with hopes that the per watt price would come down when we actually build it.
Jason, is that Catherine?
I would just say to the public that this, additional answers to these questions are now something they can go look at.
Right, yeah.
Cause there is some other stuff that we didn't cover, like for low income, some answers to some of those questions.
Right, yeah, I think if they're not already, we can put the slides that Craig worked on the website.
And you know, if anybody's watching, community has the ability to restore Catherine's faith in the Frankfurt populace, is, you know, her optimism could be rewarded if we have enough people come up for this, so.
And Kathy, we'll be looking for the public media selling campaign of a lifetime. Yeah. Steve?
I was gonna say, the question that, the point that Catherine made about KYMEA, I really think that discussion has to happen
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah, very soon.
Your meeting, their meeting's what, this Friday?
It's Friday, all right.
Thursday, they will have
Thursday.
a board meeting. Friday is their annual meeting.
Would we get any direction? Do we need any direction at that point, or ask them for direction that we're considered it? We got a budget coming up. We're open to, we'll look at some options with them.
Yeah. Actually, I already asked him directly.
Uh-huh.
I told him last board meeting, said that the Frankfurt Plan Board directed me to ask directly QMEA, you know, work out a process for the community solar. And then some of the board member said, well, they may have an interest to go together. I said, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a conversation end there. But I'm pretty sure, you know, later, I hope in next board meeting, I will ask them directly too, where we are, how many of the members truly have an interest, right?
Well, the other thing though is talking to Doug and just getting the mechanics of how this would operate together. I mean, they can work on that right now, even if they don't have a decision on whether they wanna go with it or not go with it. They can at least work on the mechanics of how this will work together.
There are some email he been sent out, I've been encouraging him to figure out the model, the plan. So he done some the preliminary study to say what's the percentage prescription and calorie cost. I forgot exactly. He sent out an email. He already worked on it. I just want you to know that, yes.
Cause that one key thing is, I think we need to have that, you know, if we plug the number in the budget, we're over that hurdle initially. But we need to know where KYMEA stands before Kathy starts her public relations education campaign. I mean, we need to know what we're selling.
Originally, I asked him direction is because we have to work on all the legal, you know, because of all requirement. That's the initial conversation I had with them. I said, I want to have a policy, the board of KYMEA can prove, allow the Frankfurt to move forward for our own community solar. But I opened and said, you know, because you suggest, say, if it's KYMEA, will be even better. So I did ask that, and I said, we definitely open for.
Cause what do you think, Kathy? You need probably at least 2-3 months to sell.
Why are you putting me on the spot? I mean, I think, you know, there's it would be an ongoing, obviously, campaign, but, you know, to gear up for something, you know, for like a kickoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least 2 months.
Yeah. So Gary, you got 2 months to get it done.
Well, and I do.
We need all kinds of information before you
Yeah.
start.
Well, and if you don't mind, Travis, if you follow up, we do need to understand this cliff. Like, once the system's paid off, how, is it a 14-year payback, is it a 22-year payback? What happens after the system is paid off with the monthly subscriptions? And then Hans, you did say something that occurred to me. One selling point was if you're a long-time monthly subscriber, you're locking in that rate, so if the other rates go up, you're suddenly, quote, making a profit because you're paying a lower rate than the electric rate at that point. Huh?
One thought, but as long as it kind of resembles your traditional
Oh, no, I'm good on that.
sale of electric, you're all right. But that's one factor, you're right.
Like, yeah, like what I was talking about, if it goes below, but then ultimately if it stays locked in and then over 10 years the rates go higher, then that's the same problem, right?
I don't know if it's a problem, it's not
Okay.
a factor that they kind of.
Okay, factor.
Look at
Okay.
that potential
Okay.
for appreciation, which might be good.
Okay.
Point, yes.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, guys. That's great.
Anything else on that topic? Okay, if not, item 8.
Mr. Chairman, I would request the bridge to call closed session pursuant to KRS 61.810(1)C to discuss pending or proposed litigation regarding the contractor matter and an OSHA matter.
Do we have a motion?
Steve's got it.
Second, Steve? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We're going into closed session in this room, so. 5-minute break?
1 minute break. Wow.